Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hey, everybody, what's up? I am on. Eventually. Late as it is, but I'm here. Yeah. Oh, I didn't turn that off. I need to turn off that Twitch thing. No tip goals tonight because, you know, it's late and I have no idea what this stream is even about. I'm just hanging out with y'all folks. The watch is off. Yeah, I had some stuff going on tonight that ended up taking up more time. Well, it didn't. I actually probably could have streamed, but I had already said to my patrons I wasn't going to be streaming. It didn't end up taking me as long as I thought it was going to take me. And so, but then I was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to hang out and relax. And so I did. But it's Tuesday and, you know, I go, hey, you know, listen, I like talking to my friends out here in the internet land and we can discuss stuff. And yeah, we've got the blue light on because people liked the blue light. So we have the blue light, rocking the blue light for people who wanted the blue light. Welcome everybody. Doing some reading up. This is from Thaddeus. What kind of settings I might want to have my Grimwild game in? It's either something pre-written or a collaborative world a la FU. Well, now that's interesting, Thaddeus, because Grimwild has not a setting built in, right? But it has kind of some presuppositions about what your setting is going to be looking like, right? Like it's kind of set up in almost a, you know, impassable terrain on the left, impassable terrain on the right, you know, civilization to the north, whatever. There's the three pillars. I don't remember how integrated that it really is into the game. Yeah. Zen Bullet. So I should not be doing this. No, you should not be doing that. I feel bad. You know, like one of the, you know, I try to create realistic goals. Sometimes they're funny and they're whatever, you know, silly. But I usually try to have something that, you know, we're encouraged to engage with and that people want to get involved with and all that other stuff. And then I feel bad if I don't have a stream topic that I feel like really anyone is actually specifically supporting. And so if I don't have a goal, then I don't feel like I don't feel as bad if I just sit here and talk about nothing and nonsense. But still true. Thank you, Zen Bullet. Yes, like even more so now. No, I I appreciate it, Zen. You know, we've just been spending a lot of time the last basically since after New Year's. We've spent a lot of time talking about, no, by all means, please continue. Far be it from me to stop you from enjoying your passions and your life's work. No, I've just been spending a lot of time recently. Cinnabos, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean,
ideas.
Listen, I'll drain it $5, $20 a time, whatever it takes. You know, I'm just saying at this, there's no goal. I don't feel like I need to own up. You said you want a full crazed idea, and there's something that occurred to me. Well, actually, there's a couple of things. So let me just share a couple of stories. So, story number one. This will lean into the rant. So this is just an unrelated story, which is, at some point, well, I don't remember, later last year. Of course, Roll for Combat is doing their Year of Mysteries this year. And as part of each month, you get a PDF, you get a new mysterious ancestry thing. It's really cool the way that they do that. I like that. It's kind of almost like I grew up with a subscription to Dragon and Dungeon magazine. And I don't think Dungeon was ever monthly. I think Dungeon was bi-monthly. So you got an issue every 2 months. And at least I don't think it was ever monthly. But I remember getting 6 issues a year. And, you know, I got Dragon magazine every month. And that was so cool. And I think we've lost some of that. I like the idea of getting this, you know, for lack of a better word, a slow trickle. And I know that that's how, you know, Roll for Combat has done their last year of blanks. And I think that's really, really neat. So anyways, they're doing Year of Mysteries. And at some point I mentioned to Stephen that, I used to do the puzzle hunt. I mean, I may have said I was a puzzle master or something like that. And so today he threw down a gauntlet. Him and Mark threw down a gauntlet and basically said, "Oh yeah, well here's our first puzzle." And I'm going to quote him here. He says he sends this puzzle. He goes, Derek, see if you can figure this out. I doubt it. And 4 minutes later, I had essentially solved it. Because now granted, I solved the methodology. It still took me probably about another 15, 20 minutes to actually put in all the details for the puzzle. But I did feel like it was very satisfying to slam dunk it. Now granted, it's the first month. The first month's the easiest month. So I think people who I'm looking forward to seeing if it as it scales up. I think that's really important. But that was very satisfying. So I appreciate that. So that was completely unrelated to anything else. It's just something that happened today. There wasn't a whole lot that happened today. Oh, I spent this morning at the Cleveland Clinic, America's number 2 hospital. My roommate Amanda had to go in for her annual colonoscopy and endoscopy. So we spent the morning there. I was waiting for her to recover so we could drive her home. It was fun. Good times. Love being at the hospital. But anyways, while I was there, I got online, on my laptop, and I was chatting with my Discord because it's just been mega game conversations, because we just did a bunch of surveys for both Northern Reaches and Dragon Tide. And there's just been a lot of talk about this stuff lately and how important it is to my finances in a short, not too short of a sentence. And of course, at one point in time, it was an absolutely massive component of Knights of the Last Call success. Now, we have a lot of people who join who do not play in our mega game. However, as I've said before, it is, I think, important to my overall success because not only does it bring in a lot of people, those people tend to upgrade. You have to be at a certain minimum level to be able to play in our mega game. But our mega games also tend to create very, very engaged and thankful and appreciative patrons who typically will upgrade their accounts to some of our premium tiers just to show their thanks and appreciation and for wanting to support the game. They know that it costs me money to run stuff. And so people take it really upon themselves to financially support it, to say nothing of all the volunteer work that is done by our various GM councils and things of that. And so right now, there's a lot of conversation going about Dragon Tide and Northern Reaches. And then we have a mega game thread. And of course, there's been this ongoing joke about doing a mega game based on or centered around Wilderfeast, which was a game we covered maybe 2 months ago, which is very dungeon meshy / Monster Hunter coded. And it's an interesting, and so you want to talk about full ridiculousness. And something occurred to me, which was today, which is that, and I mean this legitimately. I really do. I really mean this legitimately. I don't know what or why things interest me or excite me, but the idea of creating let's be very honest with ourselves. Wilderfeast is one of the most niche games that we've ever covered here. I don't think anyone really knows it that much. Even the Reddit has one post every 6 weeks. But I am legitimately more interested in figuring out that game's play pattern and a way that we can adjust it and tweak it and create and it's almost like theoretical, because I have no delusions about people playing the game. And that's what's crazy about me. I have no problem mentally, spiritually even, I am going to work on this and I'm going to problem solve for this, and I'm going to create a mega game based around this game, Wilderfeast. Meanwhile, something that would actually and by the way, if anyone did play this game, it would be people who are already Patreon members. You know what I mean? Like these, that's not selling them short. I'm simply saying these are people who are already paying me, $10 a month or whatever. So it's not like it's going to like grow my business or grow my channel or anything like that. Now I could be working on something for Daggerheart, or I could be working on something for Shadow Dark, or I could be working on something for Pathfinder 2 or 5e, or at least covering those games, or all these other things. And I wish I was like everyone else. I wish that the thing that interested me was the thing that also, we say on this channel, we quote Mark Rosewater a lot, and Mark Rosewater says, make the when we talk about game design, right? Make the fun choice the right choice, right? Don't make people have to choose between what's fun and what's good. That's a terrible place to put people, right? Make the fun thing the effective thing. I think about that a lot of times, like for 3rd edition. Right, like, and games like that, like weapon focus, which was a feat that gave you +1 to hit, was by far one of the best feats that you could possibly take, especially at low levels, but pretty much at any level, but especially at low levels, and things like that. And yet it was so boring, right? A feat like power attack or cleave was way more exciting, and it gave you all these cool abilities to do. So the fun choice wasn't always the best choice. Anyways, I wish that what interested me was something that was very popular and super, desirable, and would because let's be clear here, this isn't even about money, right? Like, because you could work on something that people are clamoring for, and no one's going to pay you any money for it, but at least that this is something that people want. It's almost like the less people want it, somehow, maybe I'm just a contrarian. I'm sure you guys are all like, duh, Derek, of course you're a contrarian. But there's something about my mental process or my mode that the more people don't want something, the more I am interested in it. So anyways, so long story short is, and to be clear, like, while Northern Reaches is still absolutely a large component of the game, of our Patreon success, in the grand scheme of things, the mega games aren't really that big of a deal. I mean, there's other things that I should be doing, but anyways, so I've been spending long story short, I've been spending way too much time thinking about these games, and Northern Reaches, Dragon Tide, Reaches, Beacon Reaches, Lancer Reaches, Wilder Reaches, some other, who knows, any game that we jokingly talk about here. And I think it's because at a certain level, there is something really, I think, compelling to me about creating an experience,
Joshua Chapman tipped $5. You are way too hard on yourself. We are here for your crazy thoughts. Also, Dolman.
Thank you, Joshua Chapman. I appreciate you so much for that. Dolman would come him up. So I just got an email, Joshua, from my contact over at Exalted Funeral, and there was, I guess, a shipping snafu, because I wasn't sure if they were sending me a bunch of stuff, and it turns out they are sending me a bunch of stuff. So they are going to be sending me the Dolman Wood stuff, and when it gets here, I am planning on uncovering it. Certainly covering the campaign setting, maybe covering a little bit of the vibe of the game itself. I mean, mostly it's just OSE, of course. But I'm really looking forward to covering that. I think Dolmenwood looks beautiful. I think it's really cool, and I think it's really presented well. Although it's still so interesting to me to see people so excited about a game that is essentially 1981's BXD&D, including like the fact that, like, talk about the rich getting richer. Who was covering it? Dave Thomavor was covering Dolmenwood, I think, today, or released a video, and he was looking through it, and again showing that you have the prime requisite attribute bonuses that give you experience point bonuses. TLDR, like if you're a fighter, and remember, you roll random, your stats are random. If you have a higher stat, like let's say you're a fighter and you have a higher strength, obviously that's already better, especially because it's rolled randomly, right? So you're already going to be hitting more often. You're going to be doing more damage. But then BXD&D also says you're going to get bonus experience points. So if you're a low strength fighter or even a modest strength fighter, not only do you not get a bonus to hit and not get a bonus to damage, but you also don't get an experience point bonus. So it's like old school D&D. It's like, and it's just so counterintuitive to the way that any sort of reasonable modern game would be designed today, that it's crazy. Because I actually thought about that once. What game was it? It wasn't BXD&D, but we were doing something. It was old school, like, I don't remember what game it was. Anyways, we used random stats. And I had come up with a table, or I'd come up with a chart that basically the worst, I think we kind of reversed it. I don't think it was a stick and a carrot thing. But basically, like in the sense that I think it was just a carrot. The worse your stats were, the bigger your XP bonus was. So if you had like God tier stats, you basically got no bonus to XP. But if your stats sucked, you potentially got like a massive bonus to XP. And I remember that was a really interesting idea or an interesting concept. It's like, well, which one do you want? Do you want the sick bonus to XP, or do you want, the good stats? Not that you get to pick it. You have to roll randomly at whatever game that was. But I thought it was an interesting, at least it made you feel better about having, if you did roll low and got low stats. But also I thought it was interesting because it kind of made you think, like, what is more valuable to me? Which would I rather have? And what's going to be better for me in the long run? There's no real clear answer. Which would you rather have? Great stats. Large. XP. All right. Where's my OBS? There it is. Poll. All right, poll is up. Which would you rather have? Great stats or a large bonus to XP? Yeah, it's a level-based game. D20, esque type game. But let me be very clear here, though. It's not like modern superhero fantasy. Okay, let me say that. So it's not like where you get, you're level 5. Okay, so you have plus 10 to hit over somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, it's more like an old school game. That probably should clarify that, right? So like, Zarian, I should have had a third option. Can I choose neither? That way I can role play. You know what? My mistake. My bad. All right, resetting the poll. There we go. Sorry. We have to update this. All right, sorry. Vote again. Sorry, people. Zarian is absolutely right. How dare I forget about the role players? That's my fault. D Priest, I love it. A bunch of sadists and masochists in this party or in this group here today. What? Contrarian? Yeah, I know. Pumpkin. What's up, Pumpkin? Derek, which design do you think someone should pursue? A game that is possibly a better idea that the designer finds more exciting, or a game that particular designer will be better at designing? Great question. I mean, I think it comes down to, what are your personal goals, and what are you trying to do with your design? I mean, if you're trying to make a living, you probably need to make certain, decisions that put more money in your pocket, and you designing the better game might come up to it. But it's interesting that you say that, because the implication there is that if being passionate about the game is going to not necessarily produce the better outcome. And I think that being passionate about a game can definitely produce better outcomes. So in certain cases, I don't know, because we cover a lot of games. We covered over 30 games this year, I think. And there could be a great idea, and poorly executed, it can ruin that idea, you know? And that's the problem, is that sometimes there's a great, you know, we a lot of times we might say these games are half baked or, you know, underdone. And that sometimes has some, you know, certain like editing and layout considerations, but it's also like one of those things where it's like the idea is so good, but it was just, you know, executed so poorly. And that is a real factor. Now, some of that also comes into less into passion and more into just the skill of design as a whole. But I think that there's something to be said about usability. And so, you know, there's sometimes there's great games that have just incredibly passionate designers behind them, and then they just don't, you know, they just don't stick the landing. And so as good as the game might be, it's a little hard to try to, you know, to want to get invested into that, you know? And I think that's true. Bacon Reaches would be cool. I assume you mean Beacon Reaches. Yeah, I think so too. I mean, again, we have Nell, Tim Gonzalez from Pirate Gonzalez Games apparently has been working on a Foundry module, and Nell has been working on a Foundry module, even sent it over to them, and they were like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is pretty sick. I know a lot of people want to play Lancer, and, you know, again, I have certain concerns about those games. In fact, what I told people is that, you know, because again, full stop. I mean, you want to talk about something like this. I thought Beacon was really interesting. And I said, oh, that would be a really cool way to do it for a mega game. And then it was kind of like womp, 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 because the Foundry module was really out of date and all this other stuff. And then someone's like, well, you know, Lancer is basically the same game, but it's also mechs. And, you know, and it's got CompCon. And there were some other problems. Lancer was only V12 instead of V13 for Foundry. So it's not like it was perfect. But for all intents and purposes, Lancer was much better. Now, there were certain issues I thought, with the game. And to quite frankly, I just wasn't as excited about it. I didn't have the same passion for it. I didn't see there were mechanics in Beacon that were not in Lancer, and there were certain elements of the way that mega games work that, you know, my passion for Lancer was never the same as it was for Beacon. And I understand that for other people it was the same, if not higher, because they really liked the world of Beacon, or Lancer, or they really liked the mechs. And I will freely admit some of my, you know, distaste for Lancer has to do with, you know, the presentation and the art of how the mechs look, and some of the, you know, elements of the setting that I don't like as much. And I don't think buy into my mental mode of what a mech mega game would look like. A mech mega game to me is sort of like a, you know, a desperate crusade on the far end of space where you're barely, you know, scavenging to keep your mechs running and find enough fuel to keep them running. And you're, you know, there's a much more kind of grim and gritty and, you know, just rub some dirt in it type thing. But, yeah. See, the other thing is, at the end of the day, ideas are cheap. You can always come up with more. I don't know. I mean, a good idea, I don't know. I find that good ideas are hard to come by. Maybe that's just me. But, yeah. Yeah, I never really, I checked out Icon like once, and I don't remember what I thought of it. Honestly, I don't really remember anything of it. In 3 years, we'll just be a Vampire the Masquerade LARP mega game. I don't know. I don't know where we're evolving to. I mean, obviously, we spend a lot of time talking about other RPGs, and I don't have as many live streams now where I talk about like tips how to be a good GM, because I feel like I've talked about that stuff a lot, and I'm always kind of like, you could just go back and watch our old VODs. And I understand that there's some certain elements to keep, you know, talking about those things. Although I did ask my patrons today, one of the projects that I want to do this year is I want to make at least a couple what I'm calling video essays that aren't just a talking head. You know, I'm not talking about like for the algorithm, you know, some 8 to 12 minute YouTube video of some person standing in front of a, you know, a screen and standing in front of a backdrop, and then, or maybe it's a top down shot and it's just their hands flipping through a book. I'm talking about like, and not just like, oh, here's a image from a B-roll. I mean, like something that's actually produced to a certain extent. I don't want to say a short film, but like something that has a lot more editing and care and concern and put into it, and, you know, multiple shots and setting things up, and you know, something that I can actually kind of sink my teeth into a little bit, just because I want to, you know, kind of work on some of my. I'm always trying to improve stuff, and I'll be honest with you, the live stream format is very lazy in the sense that, you know, I just turn my lights on and I go, which is one of the reasons why, like, we had that stream this past weekend where it was like me just fiddling with lights. And I enjoy cinematography, and I enjoy lighting, and I enjoy, you know, the elements of all those factors that go into telling a story through a visual medium. And it kind of made me kind of want to indulge a little bit more into that in this year. So hopefully I can find a topic or three that I can get really interesting in, and have something, a valuable story or lesson or whatever to tell, which I think is really the other important part of it, right? Entertainment and education are the pillars of this community. Ooh, heavy snowfall. Jealous. It was like 50 degrees Fahrenheit today here, so all of our snow melted. But I think it's supposed to start snowing a little bit more, but then it's supposed to rain a little bit. You know, we'll see. No, I mean, full transparency, that is 100% true, that it is also a great way for me to become exposed, you know, for that. That is true, Cinnabos. In fact, actually, one of the reasons I stepped away from doing scripted content is because community members, patrons, thought I sounded so wooden, and they didn't like it because everyone's so used to hearing me riff off the cuff. No, you know, and reading naturally off of a teleprompter, off of a script is a skill for sure. But also, even if it wasn't a skill, there's still going to be a difference. There's going to be a difference in cadence. There's going to be a difference in tone and language. Obviously, I can take a lot more time when I'm scripting something to, you know, maybe use a better word and less fill words, and, you know, the ums and the ahs and that stuff. And people thought they thought it sounded weird. So I kind of was like, well, all right, I'll pass on that. And also, too, to be completely honest with you, the only reason I was doing the scripted content was to try to, you know, get more eyes on the prize. The fact is, nobody watches any of my videos. I mean, it's a combination of algorithms and stuff as well. Thank you for the Prime sub, Strata. Appreciate you. So there's basically no reason for me to do those. Now, if it's something that I care about and I think it's a cool project and I want to work on it, then I will. I mean, the entire Rise of the Rune Lords is basically an example of that. All of those early videos of me just, you know, with all the editing, and I mean, some of you may remember the Black Maga, and I created I animated the Black Maga attacking, and I had special effects go across the screen and all the stuff that I used to do in After Effects and all that other stuff. And I did that stuff, not because I thought it was going to make me into a popular YouTuber, but because I thought it was really, really cool. I thought it was fun, and I was enjoying it, and I'm doing it. And then once it stopped becoming fun, and it's like, okay, well, not everything's fun. It's got to be work. Okay, yeah, but it also wasn't making me money. So if something's not fun and it's not making you money, you know, and you don't have to do it, then my advice is usually stop. So I did, basically, is what it came down to. But in this instance, it's something that I'm particularly interested in. So I could put together, say, a 30-minute or 35-minute video essay about a topic and really explain it and go into detail. Again, I use the term long form, and whatever that means. It'll be as long as it needs to be, but, you know, it's not going to be as long as one of our typical streams. But for me, you know, to tell me the story, do the thing, and then not just talk to a camera, but have you know, have B-roll, have voiceovers, have multiple different shots, you know, structure in a storytelling capacity, as well as presenting the information, and, you know, essentially a mini movie. Yes, ironically, in our instance, long form actually means shorter. That is very true, Derek. But if I did that and I was proud of that work and it gave me the work, I don't care how well it does. Like, it could get, you know, 10 views. I don't really care. That's not how I define success. I've never defined success that way. It's more of like, do I feel like I got the message across in the way and the manner in which I wanted it to get across? That's the only thing I care about anything, really. So and this is the problem for me, is like going back to the mega game thing. I would rather create the mega game that was perfect for me, and that really exemplifies my vision of the game, and then no one would play it, and then it's like, but I'm happy with that. I'm like, okay, we did shorts. It was a complete disaster, Zarian. I can't do shorts. There's no way. There's just no way. I don't even necessarily know that it has to be useful to people, obvious. They can be entertained. That's fine. They don't have to act on it. Again, we're here for entertainment and education, but, you know, generally speaking, I don't want it to just be filler, just to get a video out, just to get views and that type of stuff. For sure. I don't know what that means. Typical pre-Dagger week or post. I'm not really quite sure what I know what that means. Edutainment. Yes. Well, the joke is that when we started to quote unquote do shorts, Smith was like, "Oh, I'll put some videos together," and he was like, "Well, it was tough, you know." He's like, "But I watched it," and I go, "Okay, Smith, this is 5 minutes long." He goes, "Yeah, it's a short," and I go, "Smith, it's a short at the time." I was like, "A short can only be 60 seconds max," and he was like, 60 seconds? Holy shit! What are we doing? I was like, exactly. I have no idea. It's crazy. Well, that's the thing. There are people who, when we were having so here's the difference. You know, when we're having a conversation, I don't view my live streams as being a presentation. I view it as a conversation. And for me, in my real life, conversations are full of tangents. That's what makes it a conversation. That's what makes it friendly. That's what makes it this. I spent a good chunk of my career as an analyst and a data scientist doing presentations for both small groups, large groups, important groups, all the way to the CEO and the executive committees and stuff of companies that I worked for. That's a presentation. And while I try to make it in, you know, fun and and somewhat lighthearted, and I try to, you know, keep the pace flowing, and I can certainly roll with the punches. Fundamentally, I am there to present information and to be very potent. So I'm not going to go off on a tangent during a presentation. So that's the difference between the live stream and a video. This is a conversation that we're having right now, and you know, the video or whatever is a presentation. So no tangents, or at least I'd prefer to avoid the tangents. Yeah, Knights of Last TikTok. Yeah, please no. We just did YouTube Shorts. I can't even imagine being on TikTok. No, Uval cards. That is such a disaster. It's not even funny. Number one, we've done it before, and it's not done well. In fact, not famously, but recently, we did a specific Daggerheart stream where I covered tips and tricks to GM Daggerheart better. And I specifically, during the live stream, had like a countdown timer and everything where I kept myself, and there's no script, so I was just kind of feeling this on the flow. It was like, keep myself to 10 minutes on each point, so that after the stream, I could go in very easily, find the start, and, you know, avoid tangents, avoid, you know, stupid, you know, polls or, you know, whatever, and really try to stay on topic and cover that point as succinctly as possible. You know, I'm sure there was topics that I would have probably gladly talked about for half an hour just on that, but I tried to make a point, stick to it, reiterate it, you know, the classic. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I just told you, and try to do that in 10 minutes. And we did that. And we did, I want to say we did a dozen tips or something. And I edited them and I started putting them out there, and they did terrible. Nobody watched them. So, you know, so even doing that was, you know, I think if you add up, now I think I stopped publishing them, but like, I think if you add up the first 5 or 6 of them that I published, I want to say that they barely had more views than the live stream itself. And obviously doing it that way takes more work, not a ton of work, because it was kind of almost pre-edited, because I basically edited it live as we were doing the show. But, you know, it disrupted the conversation for the sake of the future editing. So there you go. 7+ K is pretty good. I will say that. And it's one of those interesting things where it's interesting that the first one, because, it's not like I understand from like an actual play, where you might watch the first couple episodes and then decide, I don't like their style of play, or I don't like their voice, or I don't like their whatever. And then you stop watching it. The story doesn't grip you or whatever. But these were GMing tips. And I don't even know that like they were in a particularly like the first one's the most important one order. They were just kind of tips. So it's very strange to me that the first one did really, really well. And then the other ones kind of, fell off. Which I think is interesting. You think the first one was clickbaity? Here's how I don't even know my own channel. I have no idea what the first one was. Let's see. Maybe it is clickbait. Maybe I accidentally created clickbait. What Daggerheart is not. All right. I guess that's kind of clickbaity. That's an interesting question too. What would happen if I remove the numbering, right? Because it's listed as tip number 1, tip number 2. You know what? I'm going to go with. Wait a second. It doesn't have 7K views. It got 4K views. The one that Beowulf was talking about was critical role stays with D&D, R.I.P. Daggerheart. That wasn't a Daggerheart tip. That was literally me just hitting record like the moment that happened, and then just publishing it immediately. That's like saying I did my Jeremy Crawford. That was my number 1 video of last year. D&D's Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford leave WotC for Daggerheart. And again, we woke up to that news and I just hit record and I did it in one take and I did 6 minutes and then I uploaded it and then that was it. And people were like, other content creators like, how did you get that out so fast? And I was like, because there was no script and there was not, my streaming setup's ready to go. And I just hit record and I just read the article and I reacted and then that was the video. Anyways, that was my number 1 video last year. No, I have 2 dogs. I'm allergic to cats, or at least I used to be. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been around a cat, so I couldn't actually tell you. Yes, it was so accidental clickbait, yeah. To be clear, D&D's Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford leave WotC for Daggerheart was literally not, that is literally exactly what happened. So, I don't know. Again, it's like, well, that's clickbait. I'm like, but that's literally what happened. And I was reading the actual news briefing that got released. Were they numbered? Yeah, they were numbered. It says tip number 1, tip number 2, tip number 3. I don't think it says it on the thumbnail. Oh no, it does. In the upper left corner, it just says number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1. So, but it's not like it's a. Anyways, I don't know. Take care, Kidrissa. Do not watch this VOD. There will be nothing valuable here. Let's see. Yeah, those were fun, Deep Priest. My history of class videos were really informative. Maybe something in that vein. Yeah, I could see that being something that I could do, for sure. I think those are, even though those are live streams, obviously there's a lot to talk about because we cover 50 years of the game, and I try to get in to the real nitty gritty of it and to the play patterns of it. But yeah, something like that, maybe edited better with a lot more B-roll and different shots and different conversational styles, and I think that'd be a lot interesting. Right, clickbait doesn't really tell you, right? It baits you into clicking it. So, yeah, news is just, you can't say news is clickbait. People just look at the thumbnail. They don't want to see part 3 when they didn't see part 1 or 2. I mean, I'm not going to say you were wrong. Well, that's kind of what I was trying to say, Gridlock, is I've done hundreds of hours of GM tips and advice and to this point. I mean, I'm kind of kidding, of course, but what I'm going to say, I'm like, I mean, if you haven't gotten it from what I've told you so far, I mean, maybe you're just never going to get it. I'm just kidding. But yeah. Am I joining the RFC stream that is in 15 hours? I believe I have to be, because I don't think Steven is going to be there. I think he's still with his family on vacation. And so I think it's just going to be me and Mark. I think, question mark. I don't know. Yes. I have to get blood work in like 9 hours, fasting. So I'm a little hungry because I skipped dinner. So I'm going to get blood work in the morning at 9. And then I'm going to go from there to, I'll probably get some coffee and get something to eat. And then I'm going to go to the dentist because I either have a cracked filling or something's going on with my back molar. So that'll be cool. So that's at noon. And then hopefully they don't have to do any work, or if they do have to do any work, it's not going to be too bad on my mouth, because 3 hours later, I'm going to be on Roll for Combat. And then I'll finish Roll for Combat at 5 so that I could then head straight to, you guessed it, racquetball. Then, after racquetball, I'm going to head over to my buddy's house because he's my friend who just got a sick new job, and he bought us both tickets to go on a Emo's Not Dead cruise at the end of the month. And so I'm going on that. And we have to like go over the cruise options because he's never been on a cruise before, I think. Whereas obviously I've been on many. And so he doesn't really know what we should be signing up for or what we need to sign, or what we need to do and all this other stuff. So we're going to be, so I told him, I said, I'm kind of busy all the week. And he goes, and I go, oh, right. You don't go to bed because he works. He works out of, he lives here in Cleveland, but he works in San Francisco, or his company's based out of, not San Francisco, Berkeley. So anyways, so point is he's up late like me. So I said, oh, well, in that case, if you don't mind, I'll come over around like 8 or 9 o'clock. And he said, yeah, he's like, I don't even consider that late. And I said, okay, cool. So tomorrow is going to be a very full day. So yeah, it's going to be blood work, dentist, Roll for Combat, racquetball, cruise planning. It's called Emo. Emo is not, or Emos. Emo is Not Dead. And it's basically a cruise. It's a normal cruise. It's a Carnival cruise, but it's a normal cruise. But then they book a bunch of mid-tier emo bands, depending on how you define it. And I mean, it's not like they have like, it's not Paramore, or anyways, point is, and then it's going to be a bunch of 30 and 40-year-olds, trying desperately to relive their teens and early 20s, which is 100% what I expect there to be. So it'll be good times. What's up, Tori? Derek is an elder emo. Yes, Derek is an elder emo. I don't expect there to be too many tight pants. I mean, it is Caribbean cruise, but it is January, so it's not like it's like people are going to be like super. I don't know. We'll see. It's been a long time since I've been on a Carnival cruise. I usually go on Royal Caribbean, just who I like, and I like their things. Story of the Year is okay. Amberlin's okay. But who am I looking forward to seeing? Well, Story of the Year is going to be there, which is fine. Census Fail is there. Saves the Day is there. Silverstein, We the Kings. Let's see. I mean, of course, I'm an Ohio guy, so Hawthorne Heights is going to be there. I mean, again, it's a lot of emo bands. I don't like. I think the headlining band is The Used, which is whatever. I mean, they're okay. But I'd much rather. There's a couple. There's more. I like. Mayday Parade and Paramore and But Real Friends, those are some of my favorites. What do your 40s look like that you want to relive your 20s? I am so done with this being 20-something bullshit. Yeah, well, Yuval, mostly it's just being young and, not hurting when you wake up in the morning. That's that alone is good enough for me. Oh, sweet. That's awesome. Yeah, I was never much of a whatchamacallit, a musician. Let's see here. Let's see. We gotta have some pictures here. No, I don't know where they are. Just pictures of me at various emo events. Yeah. I mean, to be clear, I don't think now is too bad. I mean, obviously there's things that I wish were, different or whatever, but I'm not too nostalgic in that way. I mean, I definitely agree with that. Being 20 now sucks way more than it was 20. So when I was 21, right, I had my own apartment. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. I was 21. I had a 2-bedroom apartment. I was just out of college or whatever. And I had that for a couple of years. Then I moved in with a couple of my buddies and we got a house, a full-blown house. And there was 3 of us. And my cut of the bills was like $350 a month. And it was awesome. These are like 2 of my great friends. And, we would hang out. And then while I was there, I saved up a little bit of money. And I was like 25 or something when I just bought my house. So, kids today could never, they just couldn't. They could just never. So, I mean, I was very happy. I mean, my 20s were very different than the modern 20s for sure. Beowulf is in full-blown midlife crisis mode. I kind of already did that, right? When I, left my job and got fired and got laid off and, we decided to go live in the woods and hike. And then I'm going to be a photographer and then I'm going to start a YouTube channel. And so I'm already kind of living that. I kind of already went through that for sure. Yeah, completely impossible. Just cannot possibly be done. No way. No debt, had a car. I mean, just like, just insanity. Nowadays I see tons of people frickin' buying their groceries on frickin', what is that 4-payment thing that's on everything now? I'm about as, now granted, I there were some mistimings. Like, I bought my house and then, Affirm, that's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, Jackal. Affirm is the one I'm thinking of. I bought my house and then the housing, the Great Recession, right? The housing crisis and that thing all fell apart. And, that was circa 2000, whatever that was, 2008. And the whole thing fell apart. And like my house lost like half of its value, like in the first 24 months of me owning it. So, that was kind of a kick in the nuggets, but yeah, I can't imagine it's been easy for people out there, one recession after another and just disaster after disaster and stuff like that. Yeah, Black Wrecked, I agree. Again, my single greatest advantage that I had through my 20s and 30s, aside from being almost predominantly gainfully employed and doing very well for myself, not like crazy well, but very well for myself, is I was doing well for myself. I was mostly single, or if I was in a relationship, it was not like I wasn't married, I wasn't engaged. So I kind of got to I basically kept all my money. I lived well below my means. I never got into debt. And, even as I got older, my bills shrank. I never had any desire to sort of keep up with this idea of lifestyle. So, when I started my career, whatever, in my 20s, making $45,000 a year, and then, when I got my first real big boy job and I was suddenly making $75,000 or $85,000, it's not like I went out and I didn't buy a Benz, and I didn't start buying, $150 shirts and, $1,000 shoes or anything like that. I just kept buying and wearing and doing the same things that I've always done. Now, I don't feel bad about paying money for something that I know I'm going to use and the quality of it matters. Things like, for example, audiovisual equipment and all that other stuff. But for the most part, I don't have any vices, And in fact, if I had a major vice during that era, it was buying expensive Magic the Gathering cards, which turned out to be a really good investment because I sold them all for almost 2 or 3 times what I bought them for during the time when I wasn't working for like 3 or 4 years when I was starting this channel and my business was failing. But I did all of that and I didn't get into any debt because my hobby basically made me money. And I have a lot of friends now, younger friends, mostly, they have nothing. I mean, it all goes, into DraftKings, basically, more or less, or it just goes into something that just has zero chance of ever having any sort of financial, return on investment. People who have like $400 a month of media subscription between Netflix, Hulu, Disney, Paramount, whatever, all those different things. And it's like they're spending all this money on these subscriptions that get them nothing in return. And, that's, I mean, if you enjoy that, that's how you live your life. I mean, far be it from me to criticize you. But yeah. Well, there's that. There's that too. My particular career, I think, was very hit hard by the the AI boom and stuff like that. What? Not if you don't. Not here's the thing: if you get value from it, yeah, you shouldn't. But if you're one of those, if you're not making, if you're blowing all your money each month and you have 20 patrons and you don't ever use them, you don't get any value from them, yeah, maybe you should reevaluate. Maybe you should reevaluate if you feel like you're getting the value out. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a Netflix subscription, but I know so many people who have like 20 subscriptions. They're clearly not watching all of that every month. So what do they need it all for? They don't. So, but yeah. So, there you go. Now that's the spirit. That's the spirit there. So that's another. There's also advantages that I have that maybe other people don't have, which is like I don't really like to eat out that much. I cook almost all my meals at home. I'm very, I don't really like. I like to cook. I like to meal prep, even if I'm not trying to quote unquote lose weight or whatever like that. And so I've never had a problem with like the restaurants and, the bars and the drinking and the, smoking and the, drugs or whatever like that. I don't do any of that. So, again, my money just kind of remains mine, which is why when, I lost my job last year and they laid me off, I was kind of like, well, that sucks, but, we should be all right. We got to figure out a few things. We got to put a few things in order, but we should be all right. Yeah, but you got those tickets though, Pumpkin. Those that can should, to the extent of their ability, to the extent of one's ability, to the extent of one's need. If people can support, it is well appreciated. I will say that, for sure. Besides, I don't need any of that stuff now. I just live stream. That's all I do. When I'm bored, I just turn on the camera. Yeah, I'm not trying to say like I'm some sort of super saint or something like that. There were definitely parts and times of my life where I spent, way too much money on like the strip club, for example. Fully admit, was I having fun? Yes. Was it mentally the healthiest thing that I could have been doing? No. I mean, a lot of that money was bottles and service and cocktails and the jazz. Not to mention dances and VIP rooms and all that other stuff. So, again, I'm not a saint. I'm not perfect or any stretch of the imagination. But I've always felt like even when I'm out of control, I feel like I'm in control of my out of controlness. Like for me, it's like I have the ability to like turn the switch, my control switch to off, get stupid, get dumb, get crazy, spend more money maybe than I quote unquote should. But then I have that ability to just go and turn the control back on. So that's always been my advantage. It's like even when I'm out of control, I still feel like I'm in control. Like a lot of people might think that they are, and then they're not. They're like, I can quit at any time, and they really can't. I have always been able to. So that has been my blessing, my discipline in that way. I will ignore everything. I mean, unless Two Little Mice put something. Yeah, like for example, I did not back Twilight Sword because I had spent a lot of money on Fabula Ultima, and I had spent money on other Kickstarters, and I spent money, on so many PDFs and stuff like that, and it's through Free League, so I'm thinking maybe there's an inside chance I can get this for free anyways, and I just made a decision not to pull the trigger. I don't know. 5 days of dinner for $10 is pretty tough. I mean, that's like maybe if you're eating like rice and beans type things. But I mean, I my cost per meal is very affordable. Derek, what do you know about choose your own adventure books? I know that they were very popular when I was in like 4th grade. Whereas, see, I appreciate the hell out of the sex working industry. I think it's a lot of fun. I think obviously it's got, parts that are exploitable and bad and not good. But I also think that, I think the puritanical views of people around sex is not necessarily a healthy thing either. So I think, if they got it, if they got it, get it. That's what I'll say. Sword World could be a possibility if for no other reason than I have long been very interested in. I gotta ban this person. Hold on. Long been a fan of Record of Lodoss War, and Sword World was basically the Record of Lodoss War RPG. So, streamer cred is a little bit of a misnomer. Almost everybody who has given me something for free knew me or knew our channel. They knew us. They found us. They were already a fan. So, like, very rarely, if ever, did I ever reach out to anybody. Like, for example, let me pull up this email. So, our contact over at why did I just pay $140 to the Forge? What the hell was that for? Oh, it's an annual. We have so many Forge servers because that's an annual. That's not even our Northern Reaches one. I was opening up my email to find this email. I was like, when did we have so many Forge servers? I don't even know how much money we give them. Okay. So, Andrew, who's our contact over at Exalted Funeral, had, reached out to us, and he, I didn't reach out to him. He had reached out to me earlier in the year, and he said, hi, Derek. I was wondering if you'd be open to receiving review copies of our products for your channels. If so, what's a good place to send them? I know you're into that kind of thing, so let's chat about what other types of game you're interested in reading, playing, reviewing, blah, blah, blah. Fan of your content and your show. Hope you're rolling well. Cheers. so and so from Exalted Funeral Press. So they reached out to me, and I kind of was just like, oh, whatever. But I love OSE, and so eventually, that they're the people that have been sending them to me. So there's kind of an interesting, kind of give and take with that as well. I'm very bad at doing that type of stuff. The lights need to be darker for this level of. All right. I gotta go darker. Vin is here. We'll go from 20% to 10. Here we go. And we'll cut this off there. There we go. Now we're on our moody bullshit. There we go. Is that better? Sword World is the root of all anime. Watch out, Derek. Well, again, the root of all anime, in theory, I like, right? I grew up thinking anime was really cool. I love Record of Lodoss War and some of the other Fist of the North Star and some of that other stuff that I thought was really cool. It was after it grew up, maybe, that I didn't like it as much. No, I don't know that game. Where's Blades? I don't know that. Yes, Derek After Dark. Welcome, everyone. Well, take care, Thaddeus. I mean, I can't stay up too late myself because, again, I have to wake up and get my blood work done. Yeah, I don't remember if I backed Broken Empires. But the good news is I'm very friendly with Trevor Duvall. We're friends. Okay, I backed the project. Okay. All right, never mind. I was going to say, because I'm sure he'd give me some sort of review copy, but it looks like I backed it. What did I back here? I backed the core starter bundle. You get the box starter set and hardcover core rule book. This also includes all digital content and stretch goals. There we go. So I did back that. I've been hearing more whispering about Sword World and Where's Blade. Yeah, I don't know Where's Blade, but Sword World, I mean, Sword World's an old RPG that there's always been a fan edit into English, fan translation. But now they're doing like an official English translation of Sword World 2.5 or something like that. I mean, it could be cool. It could be cool. I mean, I love Record of Lodoss War. It's awesome. I love both the. All right, anime people, help me out. I love both the OVA and the anime. Right? They're different. Is that right? Am I saying that right? I don't know the terms. Goblin Slayer is basically Sword World for anyone who's curious about that, right? And it's like really harsh, I believe. Are you familiar with Gila RPGs? The name sounds very familiar. I can't remember if we covered that, but the name sounds really familiar. Maybe it was we covered on itch. Maybe it was on itch.io, I think. I'm not sure. They are different, and that's correct. All right. Well, the reason I know is because there's the version of Record of Lodoss War that was like 12 episodes that like is like the standard one, and then there's this other one which is called Record of Lodoss War Chronicles of the Heroic Knight, and it's like the same story, kind of like told differently with a slightly different animation style, and I think it was done more episodically, and it has more characters in it, and I think there's also more episodes in it. But they kind of like retell the same story in some ways, or they kind of tweak it in others. And they're both very, I think they're both very cool. I mean, I prefer I guess what they would call the OVA better, but that's just me. For my money, the battle of the characters against Carlo, the Grey Witch, is just so cool, Because again, it's a D&D battle. It's not like it's some over the top shonen. They're not like charging up their superpowers and whatever. 1989. All right, Mecha Sword Fighter. There we go. Yeah, somebody asked me. They said, "Good night, Gridlock." They said, "What games are you really looking forward to for 2026?" And I didn't know. I was like, I don't really know that there are any games that I was really looking for. Sword World was the only one I could really think of, just because again, it's been part of like something that I've been aware of for so long that I just didn't know. Other than that, I don't know that there's anything I am looking forward to. I mean, it's 2026 now, technically. I mean, I'm looking forward to getting my bestiary for Fabula Ultima, hopefully any day now. I got a session on Friday. Let's go. Stone Top. Actually, I had to confirm. I am a backer for Stone Top, but I think I just don't care anymore. I kind of feel about Stone Top the same way I kind of feel about Dungeon World too, honestly. I have been getting updates from Jason Lutz for an extremely long time. Anyways, Stone Top is a powered by the apocalypse game that is a fantasy. I would say it's a low fantasy game that really focuses on a village, and it really focuses on the sort of the player's interaction with that town and with that people and that culture. Is the best way I could describe it. But it is, and it's made, and it's been under development for over a decade. Yeah. So pretty cool stuff. But the author, Jason Lutz, has been one of those people that's been very involved with, and Jeremy Stranford or whatever. The artist is the artist Jason Lutz, and then Jeremy Stranford or whatever is the other person. I think there's another person too involved. I don't remember who it is, but they have been like involved in the Dungeon World community for a very, very, very long time. So Jeremy is the author. I think it still might be active, of one of the more well-known blogs about Dungeon World, and it was called Spouting Lore. And Spouting Lore is a Dungeon World move that what we would typically call now a recall knowledge check or whatever, but Spouting Lore. So that blog, so it's like he has a lot of gravitas, in the PBTA space, but particularly in the fantasy PBTA space, the Dungeon World adjacent space. There was a lot of people who made variants of Dungeon World, Homebrew World, and Chasing Adventure, and Fellowship, and now even Dungeon World 2. And so there's been a lot of spiritual and whatever successors to Dungeon World, because a lot of people were like, this game is good, but it's also problematic because it's trying to be D&D and PBTA, which ironically I think is why the game worked. But yeah. Mark Lore says it's a PBTA game with 800 pages total, so that alone is pretty impressive. I would agree with that. I do not know anything about Strauss's stuff from Spell and Blade, but I like most of Strauss's stuff. I mean, I love Scum and Villainy, so I know a couple more of their products, but that's it. So what I'm hearing is that you're not going to switch to being a Deathbringer only channel. No. Again, if it's your jam, you should jam it. But I am not interested in Deathbringer. There's a lot of elements that I don't like about the certain elements of the way that it's weird, because I'm very obviously old school coded, and I always talk about the importance of these old games, and I enjoy running them and I enjoy playing them. There's something that there's something about the way that people approach the games that I feel is very weird. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, a great example of this is DCC. I think what it really comes down to is I don't like DCC. I've never liked DCC. And, I don't like funnels. And, yes, Shadow Dark has some funnel stuff, and Trespasser has some funnel stuff. I think funnels are terrible because I think it's taking something that was kind of more of a flaw of original D&D and like celebrating it and doubling down on it. And I don't like that. And I don't think that necessarily means that the solution is to make the PCs be invincible. I don't think that's great either, particularly, but I think the funnel concept is bad. Strauss's name is Strauss? Oh, Strauss. Okay, Strauss. Strauss? Oh, Strauss. I always thought it was Strauss. All right. I swear I've even heard John Harper say it before, so I'm kind of surprised that I didn't know that. It's not a question of simplicity. It's just a question of what is this game trying to accomplish, right? I feel like there was a lot of, going back to that original Blades in the Dark Kickstarter, there was 6 games or 7 games that were supposed to come out, and I think we only got 2 of them or 3 of them. But yeah. But I don't even know what that means, Pumpkin. I don't think we've seen the full evolution of OSR yet. I don't know what that means. I mean, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I just, what is full evolution of what? I don't understand. Again, this is why I'm not a designer. I don't understand. I don't want to get into this topic again, but I just cannot imagine just taking a game and going, this game is great, and then saying, I'm going to do my version of that game. What is that adding to the atmosphere, to the community? What is that adding to the game? I don't know. I don't even know what old school, so much of part of the problem is so much of the old school revolution. I feel like it is based off of, it's like a conservative. Here's the weird part. It's a conservatism where, you have this rosy view of the past, but the things that they choose to celebrate and worship are the things that I don't think were great. And that's what's weird for me. It's one, and some of the things, and this is everything from the funnel and, disease tracks and, perilous, not perilous, I always call it perilous voids. Fruitful voids, I view those things as bugs, not features. And those are what people choose to focus on. And that's what's crazy to me. Self-confessed cynic coming in with a $5 super chat. What makes for really good onboarding in a non-D&D spinoff actually different game, and what game do you think has done that onboarding very well? That's a great question. I mean, I guess the question is it Is it for people who are brand new to RPGs, or is it for people who, are pretty D20 trad coded? Because if they're trad coded, I mean, that's like a whole separate, that's a whole separate issue in its entirety. So what is a game that has done onboarding really well? Yeah, because I was like, oh, PF2's got a. I think Press Start is one of the best introductory adventures I've ever read. So I think Press Start does a really good job. I think a lot of the Free League starter sets are quite good. I think Dragonbane's box set, from the fact that you get the entire set of rules, that you have this really interesting, although it's fairly simplistic, but comprehensive mini campaign that you can run. I think that's a really good thing. I think Press Start from Fabula Ultima is fantastic. The pre-gens are interesting. It gets you, into the it's real mechanics, but it doesn't like overwhelm you too much. The characters have enough mechanical complexity to be interesting. So the Press Start, I think, is really, really good. I think most of the Magpie games, that's like Avatar and Masks, I think they do a terrible example. I've heard really good things about Delian Tomb, so I haven't played it myself. I think most of the Modiphius games do a bad job of it. I'm just looking around what we got behind me. In the blue. Yeah, I think Free League might be like the people who do it the best. They come out with great starter sets, great pre-gens, really cool, clear-cut adventures. And I think that really works to their advantage. A lot of value there. The starting sets are affordable. They really highlight what makes their game cool and different and interesting. I think I've heard good things about Mothership as well. So my metrics are, does the product actually does the product actually teach you how to play the game? So as an example, I don't think I have it on my bookshelf. But this game has a starter set. And while I don't think it's terrible, I don't like it. And the reason is, I do like it, but I don't like it because it doesn't teach you the game. It teaches you like a variant of the game. And that's something I'm very not about. So I think that the game should do a couple things. Number one, I think it should introduce you to the actual mechanics of the game. Number two, I think it should actually teach you and introduce you to what makes the game important and what makes the game work. And sometimes that's a tough thing. So right now, I'm in the middle of running the One Ring starter box for Bob and Tim and Bob's brother Danny. And we did the first session, and then we have the second session. Now, this is a very short adventure, okay? And it's designed, okay? And this is Free League, so this is actually me criticizing Free League. And I think part of the problem with this is because it's part of the Middle-earth license, which is why it's very different than a lot of the other Free League sets. Because a lot of the other Free League sets, their starter sets have a lot of value and a lot of play to them. The One Ring starting adventure is very brief. What it does is it predominantly covers the three scenes types that are mechanically oriented. There's obviously always going to be free play type scenes, right? Where you're just having a conversation and occasionally making checks and, doing that stuff. That comes up a little bit in the game, but predominantly the three mechanically involved scenes are the journey rules, the council rules, and the combat rules. And the starter set basically is a journey into a combat, a journey into a council, into a combat, basically. And so it shows you the mechanics of the game. But what I don't know that it does a great job of doing, partially because it can't really, is that so much of the One Ring that makes, I think, the game work is this idea of that all people of good heart where, all people who stare into the abyss stares back. And you have this sort of gradual accumulation of the shadow. And that there's this idea of, it's not whether, it's not just it's not just if you win, it's how you win. It's not about, the means don't justify the ends. And a lot of those elements that really are important to Lord of the Rings, but are also really important to Tolkien's larger philosophy, but are really exemplified in the game, I think are completely missed with the game. Because while the game technically has the shadow points and the shadow scars, it's technically in the game, that stuff just doesn't come up in a 3-scene one-shot in a way that is meaningful or is going to matter to any of the players. The gameplay is not nearly long enough or complex enough that the players are going to ever feel like we're running out of hope, and that the shadow and the sadness and the weariness and the dread and the fear and the all those things in my heart are beginning to weigh on me. And it's and I think there's this this old there's this old like D&D debate, goes back a long time, right? Which is like, are paladins actually brave? And a lot of people say, of course they're brave, they're fearless. And then a lot of people say, how can a paladin be brave? They're fearless. And it's kind of like that with like Lord of the Rings. Like if you're playing like a short game version of it, how can you experience that feeling of that gameplay loop and really actually understand if that's, because in my opinion, that's what the game is. The game isn't a series of mechanics for combat and consoles. The game is this like your character's struggling with the weight of evil that they are facing. And how do they do that? And how do they stand by their beliefs and their convictions when just dealing with evil, even destroying evil, leaves its mark. And to me, if you don't enjoy that pattern of play, you're not going to enjoy the One Ring. And I think the starter set does a bad job of getting that idea across. So I think it comes down to mechanics. I think that's important. But I think more than anything else, it really has to sort of introduce you to what is the real core play pattern of this game. And an example of that, going back to Legend of the Five Rings, in my opinion, Legend of the Five Rings is defined by the struggle between your character's duty, okay, known as their giri, and their desire, their ninjo. So duty and desire, and the weight and expectation that is placed on you by this almost inhumanly unemotional code, the stoic code of Bushido and honor. And at the end of the day, you're just a person. You're not a god. You're not a magical being. You're just a person. Well, the starter set doesn't deal with any of that. The starter set teaches you how to make checks and how to attack, with your katana, which is great, which is cool. But that's not what that's about. Similarly, I remember a lot of people. Okay, it's one of the more complex. It's one of the more complex. We know this. It's one of the more complex PDA. It's one of the more complex PBTA games. But let me see if I can pull up Avatar here real quick. Avatar Legends. Okay, here we go. So. Oh, I thought my PDF viewer was up. A lot of people have run demos of this game, run by the people who make the game, right? Magpie. And in Avatar, you have several sets of moves. Now, you have the basic moves. These are basically the same moves that you see in almost every PBTA game, more or less, right? Things like rely on your skills and training, which in another game might be known as, defy danger, assess a situation, which in, Apocalypse World might be called read a sitch, or discern realities is what it's called in Dungeon World. Intimidate and plead and trick in Dungeon World is just called parlay, but Avatar has a lot more, again, the system is setting, and the system gives you 3 different moves for basically for interaction with NPCs and people. Because, by the way, notice that these are only for NPCs, right? Plead with an NPC, intimidate an NPC, and trick an NPC. In Dungeon World, we just have parlay, but that's because Dungeon World isn't as much about interactions with, conversational interactions with NPCs. Avatar is, and so we get 3 different moves for those 3 instances. Anyways, long story short, these are the basic moves. This is PBTA. And in every instance, in the starter set, when Magpie runs their intro games, they introduce the basic moves. Maybe they introduce the combat moves. Okay, here are the combat moves, which is you make the stance move, and then you either choose to defend and maneuver, in which case you roll with your focus stat. You choose to advance and attack, in which case you roll with your passion stat, or you choose to evade and observe. You get to clear a fatigue, which is like heal a hit point, and you get to roll with either creativity or harmony. There's only 4 stats, so these cover all the 4 stats. And again, great. Except here's the problem. I think that what Avatar is actually all about are the balance moves. And the starter sets and Magpie and Gen Con, when they run their demos, they skip all this shit. They don't even really talk about it. They might be like, oh, also there's some balance moves, and you have this balance track on your character sheet, but don't worry about it. But don't worry about it. It's what the game is about. It is the fundamental crux of what everything that this game is trying to do. It's the beating heart of this game. Everything else supports this, and the starter sets, skip it. And so I question, if you go and play a one shot or an adventure, or, starting adventure, even if it takes a couple sessions, and you don't hit upon this, and then how are you supposed to make a determination that you like Avatar, or that you know how to play, or that you get what this game is about, if it's not really highlighting what the game is about? So yeah. Most starter sets are designed to be a short adventure. I would say 2 to 3 sessions, most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. And I just think it's it's just unfortunate. Whereas Press Start is designed to be a single session. This is for Fabula Ultima. And I think that does an excellent job of teaching you what the game, not only how to play it, but also what is this game about? It's about collaborative characters. It's about making sacrifices. It's about forging bonds with your allies. It's about learning to lean on those bonds. It's about, I think it does a really great job of not just teaching you the mechanics, but actually, or the rules, but also teaching you, it's always, there's how to play. This is very mouse guard coded, right? There's how to play and why we play. So how and why, I think, are different things. I always thought Daggerheart had a great onboard, even if no one plays it right. If a tree fall, if a Daggerheart one shot falls in the middle of a forest and no one fucking knows how to play the game, does it make a sound? Well, this is more critiquing. Alexander, that is a very complex target, because some of the things, my roommate just watched Breakfast Club the other day. It's a movie from the 80s, for people who don't know what that is. It's a John Hughes film with the Brat Pack. And at the end, it's basically the idea of a group of kids from high school. They all get put in detention together, and one kid's a jock, and one kid's a nerd, and one kid's a criminal, and one kid's a princess, and one kid's a weirdo, and one kid's, in the end, they all become friends. They all realize they see so much of each other and themselves. And at the end, they have to write an essay, and they write one essay. And basically the person says, you'll see us how you want to see us, in the simplest terms and the easiest definitions. And I think that's kind of true for a lot of games and a lot of game designers. A lot of people come into a game with baggage from their preconceived notions. And so one of the examples that I often give is this game. A lot of people came into this game expecting, D&D 5th edition with Aang, where the game was going to be 80% combat, and you were going to be doing kick-ass kineticist, fire blasts and, anime wind slices and stuff like that. But that's not what the game is about. Is that the game's fault? Or is that just people coming in there with their own shit? I don't know. It's tough to say. Anyways. I was going to talk about Wilderfeast, but one thing, since I brought up my PDF. By the way, just want to reiterate, man. I was looking through Grimwild the other day. Again, wow, what a great this game. It's such a shame that the author kind of lost it there. I mean, at least we got the PDF, but man, there's a lot of cool tech in this game. I'll tell you, there's a lot of cool elements in this game that are really exciting and really interesting. But I was, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is when I was looking at Wilderfeast in this game is let's just roll on the wizard spell table some more. We can always do that. One of the things I thought was really interesting about this game is this idea of character growth, of like, it's something I think that just really lost over time. And it's something that I thought was really interesting. And again, this is in the context of mega games, but so now the game comes with a starting region. You don't have to use it. You can make your own starting region. You can make your own area, but the game comes with this area, this, reach or whatever, called the Sen Coast. Okay. And the Sen Coast, basically, it is consisted of four regions. There's a desert, there's the mountains, there's the woodland, and then there's the shore, right? Basic stuff. And when you look at a region, like if we look at the shoreline region, all the regions are composed of areas. These are the circular areas. And it's kind of like a point crawl, right? There's paths. They're called paths that connect the different areas. So for example, you could go from Dry Spout, and Dry Spout has a path that would take you to the Sud Flats or to the Giant's Larder or to High Table. But if you wanted to go to Asso Bay from Dry Spout, you'd have to go through Giant's Larder or the Sud Flats first. Now, it's possible there might be a path that exists between the two of them. Maybe you just haven't found it or figured it out yet. But one of the things that is really interesting, I think, about this game is that when you are traveling, which is a very mechanical thing, it's called the trail. It's when you're out traveling and tracking down monsters. And again, you can see here the map again. One of the things that you have to do when you're moving through an area is navigating. You have to make a navigation check. And when you're in an area, so when you're in one of these, points, okay, like Dry Spout or Sud Flats, while you're there, you can learn a way to move through that area. And once you learn that way through that area, you permanently learn that methodology to get through that area. I know this doesn't really make much sense, but like, let me take a look here. So let's say that you wanted to know how to get through Asso Bay. Well, in this game, you have 4 styles: mighty, precise, swift, and tricky. Those are basically your stats. But it's an approach-based game, not an attribute-based game. So your approaches are mighty, precise, swift, and tricky. So when you're traveling, when you're using the traveling rules, and you go to Asso Bay, one of the things that might occur when you are going through this region is you might learn a way to navigate through Asso Bay. And then your PC permanently learns that. They know that now from all times. I'm trying to find where this is here. I'm not like a master of this game yet. Here we go. Navigate. Okay. So using the rules for free play out the scene. If any of these, that basically just means, normal game. If you learn any of the following information narratively, the guide, that's the GM, also grants it to you mechanically. A safe way to travel. The pack, that's your party, permanently learns how to travel safely in this area using a certain style. That's one of those 4, what we normally would call them attributes or abilities, but they're called styles because it's like an approach. So mighty, precise, swift, based on what they learned from the community. In addition, the guide tells the pack what additional costs or consequences there might be, if any, to traveling using that style. But what I really want to highlight here is this value. I think a lot of people, when they imagine even hex crawls or they imagine normal adventures, you never go back to the same areas again and again and again. It kind of reminded me a lot of my belief around dungeon and mega dungeons in general. But the point is like, let's say that your characters are predominantly working out of Station Town Sea Bounty. Well, your characters learn how to travel through Asso Bay, and you learn, again, there's, a lot of it's, GM, up to the GM and what you do. But maybe you learn a swift way to get through Asso Bay. And maybe the GM describes it as you've learned to time low tide. And if you time low tide correctly and then you move swiftly across the bay, you can actually cross the bay before the tide returns. And so you have this new way of traveling through that space using the mechanical journey framework, using the Swift style, right? And it talks about how, like, what are the costs if you make the check or fail the check, and that might be different than a different check. Like, for example, maybe mighty, it might be like, you just, I don't know, swim it, or you get a little boat and you push yourself across the bay against the swift tidal, the swift tidal flows, and that's how you get across the bay. And there might be that area. There might be different advantages. But again, learning this is pointless if you never go back to that region or you go through that lead region multiple times. So one of the things that I think is really cool and interesting about Dolmenwood, I can't even say it. I don't know if I have the PDF on this computer. It might be on my thing. Is Dolmenwood's map isn't really that big. And I actually think that's really cool because I think it means that there's like a really good chance that you are going to learn that map and learn those areas and visit those areas again and again and again. One of the things I think is like one of the greatest regrets of most RPG campaigns is how many, in most adventure paths, in most people's home campaigns, how many locations and NPCs, and that includes both friendly and villains, are essentially one and done. And it's like, no wonder people have a hard time connecting to worlds, connecting to people, connecting to villains, or even remembering all this shit. Because rather than, dazzle them with brilliance, we just baffle them with bullshit. And instead of going for a handful of locations that are really, really, really richly detailed and we're really connected to them, we just go for quantity, right? We go for quantity over quality. And I think that's really, really, really interesting because I like the idea of your character advancing through their proficiency with the world itself. And the reason that this really tickled my fancy in a mega game sense is because, this gets back to like the whole, when I can't remember who, Tundless agreed with you as well. But when we were talking about rules complexity, and you're like, sometimes having more rules is cool just because more is more, right? Said like a true maximalist capitalist, right? More is better. Well, yeah, but what about, just more? More is better. Numbers, quantity, all of them, higher, better, more, always good. And the response is fire. But the reason why this was really cool to me from a mega game perspective is because your character, you might go on an adventure and your characters pass through the Crumble Downs. Okay. And your party that happens to be, now again, because when you're normally playing an RPG, the players that you're playing with are always the same players that you're playing with. So if your party goes to the Crumble Downs, your group may learn a style that allows you to move through the Crumble Downs. Maybe you learn a precise methodology, right? And maybe the precise methodology is you learn, it looks like this is some sort of like, probably cliff face, maybe like a sea cliff, presumably, with collapsing rock faces, Crumble Downs. And maybe your group learned a secret kind of path that winds its way up the cliffside. So you learn that. Now, normally when you play with your group of 4 players and you play with that same group over and over again, everybody in your group knows this, and you all know that because you were all there. But what's cool about a mega game is your PC may have gone through the Crumble Downs. Maybe you were chasing after a monster and you found yourself chasing that monster through the Crumble Downs. And you learn about this secret path through the Crumble Downs that allows you to navigate this location safely with a precise check. Very cool. And everybody else that is there at that session learns that method to navigate this one area space. And that's the normal game. But in a mega game, you might find yourself the next week or 2 weeks later passing through this area again. But this time you're with a group of party members who have never been to the Crumble Downs. But your character has been to the Crumble Downs. And you know about this secret path that requires you to make a precise check. And there's this really cool element of not only you, the player, being like, I know this region, I've been here before, I'm a little bit familiar with it, but to have your character mechanically have access to this ability to sort of navigate the location, and the other party members to not have that. I could easily imagine as a game moves on and forward that as a character, mechanically, your PC would develop this sort of diegetic log that sort of represents the areas that you have had the most experience with, that you've had the most time going to. Because obviously, once you know how to get through an area, that means that area becomes a little bit more accessible to you because, you're not going to have to expend the same kind of resources and time that other people would have to do to go through that area. And so you kind of build in this like expertise to your character. And maybe your character spends a lot of time at the shorelines, the foaming shore. And by after a month or 2 of gameplay, you've played in a dozen sessions, and your character, I know about the secret path through the Crumble Downs, and I know about the tidal floods of the Asso Bay, and I know how to avoid getting sucked down by the Sud Flats. And you're an expert, and you feel like, wow, okay, I've got a good bead on this. I know what I'm doing. And then suddenly your character finds themselves in a new region with entirely new areas, and your character feels that lack of proficiency. Your character feels that lack of awareness. And I think that's a really cool element. And of course, also maybe you're excited to learn. You're now excited to learn. But what's the value of learning if you're never going to go back there? And I think that's something that I think a lot of games struggle with is revisiting locations over and over and over again. Quantity has a quality all of its own. Less is more with better quality. Less quantity is needed. Harder to design that way, though. Yeah, I agree. It is. Now, Vin says, to be fair, I say this as someone whose campaigns go for like 50 to 100 sessions. So one and done means like 3 to 6 4-hour sessions for one location. This is true. When we talk about Vin, you guys have to understand something, okay? You are talking about a man, a mythological person, a person who's not even real. Okay, we're talking about the self-confessed cynic, a person who somehow managed to turn this arguably very shitty 60-page intro adventure to Pathfinder 2nd Edition into like a 100+ session long PF2 campaign that ended up fighting, I don't know, the Plaguestone god in space or something like that. He has he has all the details. This is Fall of Plaguestone, for those of you who don't know what that is. So, you know, talk about going back to the well. Too many times. Sorry, 27 4-hour sessions, whereas my group had it done in 3. And I don't even, there's no conceivable way that adventure should ever take 20. Like, what level were they? Were they like, okay, let's just assume that they were, for me, I like to level up every 2 to 3 sessions. Let's assume that they were leveling up every 5 sessions, which I still think is crazy. That would make them like level 6. Okay, by the end of that, it's the intro adventure. What is going on? That's not an intro adventure. That's like half a campaign. Yeah, must have. And now we begin to understand Vin. Now we know why Vin says he can't play a 10-level game. Now we know why Vin, okay. See, I realize what it is. See, it's that, because I mean, if your intro to your game, the thing that's supposed to take you from like from level 1 to level 3, the thing you're supposed to gain 2 levels. And instead they're gaining 6 levels. If Vin was playing a 10-level game, the game would almost be over. So Vin needs like 100 levels so that he can actually get through a campaign, because his starting adventure. But now you might say, well, Vin, why don't you just have them level up like once every, 10 to 12 sessions? That would work. But Vin can't have that, because then the numbers won't go burr. So the only solution is just to have more levels. There you go. So like, what do your campaigns have? Like 2 adventures? Like 3 adventures? Is that it? And Vin says, you're actually exactly right. That's so true. Cal says, I love how with no prior knowledge, Derek just recreated Monster Hunter. LMFAO. I do not know Monster Hunter, but apparently this is a well-known genre of games. So, but I'm really fascinated by what it is that makes a community, a gaming experience interesting and different. And how is that different from a regular TTRPG? And how do we create that sort of buy-in and that experience? Because one of the things that we've talked about with our mega games is like people getting burned out. And they can't play D&D, they can't play PF2 for 6 months. And I'm like, people play PF2 for 6 months all the time. Like they play it for 12 months. They play it for 18 months. They play it for 2 years while they're going from levels 1 to 20. What do you mean they can't? They're burning out after playing it for 6 months. And some of it is like, well, they're playing 4 times a week. And I go, well, okay, well, so their 6 months is 24 months. Okay, that's fair. But the other thing they say is there's just so much to keep track of. There's just so much to do. And it made me realize that for most people, your home RPG game is 0 effort and has 0 investment and has 0. You're not invested in it at all. You're not even thinking about it when you're not at your, you're not online for your session. And I realized, oh, okay. So that is very different, I think, than the way that a lot of people, or the way that maybe I'm thinking about the game. And so I think that that's part of the reason. For some other reason, when people play a mega game or a game online, they're much more involved in this sort of, from day to day perspectives. And when most people play an RPG game, they basically, I'm not talking about GMing it. I'm talking about playing in it. So I'm going to do a poll here. Okay. So when you are playing in a RPG campaign, how often do you not think, but how often do you do something related to the game outside the session? All right. Poll is up. I didn't reset it. Poll is up. There we go. So when you're playing in an RPG campaign, how often do you do something related to the game outside the session? Okay. Lionhead Gaming, I mean something like, talk to your fellow players about what you're going to do next. Talk to your GM about the nature of the game. Maybe, pull out your character sheet, think about your character. What is your character maybe going to do next? Or what are your character's concerns? Or what does the party need to focus on? What magical items should you be looking at? It could be build basis. It could be build oriented. But I'm really looking more for like, how often do you play the game? In fact, actually, you know what? I'm gonna reset this. I'm gonna actually, now that I'm talking, I think Lionhead Gaming. How often do you do something outside the session that is not PC build related? Okay, so there you go. When you are playing in an RPG campaign, how often do you do something out related to the game outside the session that is not PC build related? So we're going to revise this. For example, I'll give an example. I only have examples that I know, right? In my 4th edition campaign, which I ran back in 2009, we ran for 2.5 years, the first campaign, went from levels 1 to 30. Very often, very frequently, not every week, but we had 5 players. And usually between sessions, I would have players write fan fiction about our game. So, and like, for example, let's say we end the session. The group is in the Underdark and they're making their way down to a drow city. And we end the session and the group basically, is going to, find a place to hole up and camp. Okay. We end the session there. During the intervening week, one of my players might write a short story and send it out as an email to everybody that's describing that camp scene. Now, we don't role play that. We don't really, as a group, we didn't really want to role play that. We didn't feel it was really necessary. And more importantly, we were totally fine with people taking narrative liberties with our other people's characters. So like, when you're writing your short story, you're also writing what other characters' actions are, but you're just adding to the tapestry of the game. Now, sometimes it was more of a solo thing or, maybe it was like a whatever. But my point is they were playing the game, to that. Now, George, who is been a player with mine now, George wasn't a player of mine back in the 4th edition era, but George has been playing with me since, I don't know, like 2012 or something, or around that time. Says the switch from email to Discord, I think, killed it for me. And I think there's something to be said about that. I've often talked about how, most of our communication these days is on Discord, both as a group of RPG players, but also Night's Last Call. And I said, I lament the loss of, I lament the loss of the forum, right? I prefer forums. It feels more like a permanent record. It feels more like a series of actual like journal entries and logs rather than just a word vomit of brainstorming and shit posting and meme posting that Discord is. And so I do think that it's unfortunate that we've kind of lost some of that. And so what George was saying there, again, playing, is that like his ability to interact is like, because now we do most of our interaction on Discord, it feels like you're just throwing a stone, into a river. It just gets swallowed up. And I think that's an interesting point. Vin says web forums greater than emails, greater than Discord. I 100% agree with you. This was like the beauty of like Google Plus back in the day, for those of you who know that. Yeah, Discord forums, I tried, as everyone knows who's a member of my Patreon, I tried to, to make fetch happen, right? To make forums happen. And people just will not do it. They will not do it. Yeah. See, Wes is the opposite, but I very much, I enjoy that sort of methodical approach to the game or to the process. Now, don't get me wrong. Back in the day when we had web forums, I also had AOL Instant Messenger, but AOL Instant Messenger was for, shit posting and being like, hey, what are you doing later? Right? It wasn't for this opportunity to create, and craft these ideas. Plus, very searchable Zen Bullet. There's so much information and stuff that has just been lost to the sands of time. Great conversations, incredible points, but no one can ever find it because it's mixed mashed amongst hundreds of unindexable, unsearchable things, as opposed to a very clearly defined title that you can then go back to that thread. I mean, there are still old Necromancer game forums from like the early 2000s that I can find on like a Wayback Machine and go back and reference. That's how crazy it is. Yeah, but the problem is, like, I think dedicated RP channels still doesn't really work because then it's just still just a bunch of word vomit and there's nothing there. And even if you have dedicated channels, there's something about like being in a channel already, I think makes it so that it feels more like just like you're copy pasting rather than like making a post. Yeah. I mean, Discord is well named, Steam Driven. It's Discord. It's the opposite of, so it's like, what's the opposite of Discord? Order? I mean, is that what we would use there? I need to like create a new alternative to Discord that is based around structure and order. I mean, there's a million things that I liked about forums. One of the reasons with Discord being shitty for forums is because Discord doesn't really have proper mod tools. So one of the biggest advantages to a forum is somebody could make a post and someone could come in and move that post. They could say, hey, this post is off topic. Let's fork it, right? Let's create a new thread for it. The problem is like in Discord, it's like instantaneously lost, and it does such a shitty job for it because it's supposed to be all just like, again, it's supposed to be like word vomit. It's supposed to just be happening. It'd be like, honestly, imagine this channel if there was no VODs. I don't have to turn VODs on for this channel. So imagine this channel and all the hundreds and hundreds of hours of streams that I do a year if there was no VODs. And it was either you were here and you remembered it, or you missed it, or maybe you were here, but you don't remember it. And now it's just gone. It's just gone. So that's kind of the equivalent. It's an interesting distribution that we got there for the votes. Obviously, Often is and Barely are the top voters, but it is interesting that we did technically get more people that say Barely and Newer, which is Never, which is, I think, telling. Beowulf says it should be called Accord. That's pretty funny. Vin says that would rip, actually. An app like Discord, but the interface is actually just for right. Like all good things that I do, it's me fooling people, tricking people into using a superior technology. For sure. Because I do love forums. Chorus is not bad. Oh, I would never turn off the VODs. Ever. But no, I would never turn them off. I'm saying, but imagine if I did, and it would be it would be a shame, right? Because all this stuff would be like, well, you had to be there, man. It's just the live energy. It's just the energy of a live stream. Because I hear people say that about Discord all the time. They go, it's all about just the stream of consciousness and the vibes, and it's just, and it's like, yeah, that's great for just shit talking. That's great for just bullshitting around the water cooler, shooting the shit. But I mean, if you're like trying to have like structured conversations and try to make actual decisions and educate yourself. I think it's better when it's structured, or not to say nothing of the fact that the value of being able to go back to an old forum and bring it up. I mean, members of the Knights of the Last Call know this. How many times have we had the same conversation 25 times? Now we can just say, hey, let's go necro that thread again. Let's necro that post. Let's necro the what is a game post. And at this point, it's got 755 pages of posts. But starting from 2020 to to 2021 till today, and it's just like every couple months, people just getting things. I miss people getting upset about thread necromancy. I never understood why people got upset about necroing threads. Like, it's fine, like bringing it up again. I mean, it's always hard to tell if those things are like being legit or not. But what if you had a phone and it was just for your home and not only phone calls and nothing else? I find those hilarious. I saw something on Reddit the other day that made me laugh. It was like someone was like something that dates you, and it's like, remember why you're like, you remember when the phone rang and you'd get excited because you're like, oh, who's calling and who's it for and who's it gonna be? And they're like, now when my phone rings, I know who it's for. It's always for me. And I know who it is. And somebody else like replied after it, and they said, when they're like, when someone calls me, it's the worst part of my day. And I was just like, facts. Truth. Yeah. So yeah, the thread necromancy things, I never understood that. I think that stuff's great. In fact, given the context of the way that, a lot of conversations in our RPG space are recurrent, and we get new people in every year. Knights of the Last Call probably gets about 100 to 150 new members, and we lose 50 to 100 people. So and some of those people, most of the people who leave are newer people, right? They come, they join, they're there for a month or two. A lot of times it's not even like they say, oh, it sucks and I hate it, and they leave. Usually it's they got really excited, they wanted to support me, we talked about something, they were really excited about it. They sign up for the Patreon, they're expecting to get really involved, and they don't. They just, they signed up and they forgot. They went online once and then they never got back to it. And it's like a month or 2 months later and they go, oh damn, I'm still signed up for that, and they cancel. It's fine. But we also get people who do leave occasionally. Well, my point is, we have a churn. There's a certain amount of churn. And so, every 6 months or whatever, we have a pretty broad new population of gamers. And you know what they'll do? They'll be like, hey, let's blah, 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 blah. And we'll be like, man, we've had this conversation 7 times. And it's okay. They have a right to have that conversation. But it would be cool if we could say, if we could point them at the thread, and you could engage, and go, hey, first, read through the history of what is a game. And then when you get to the end of it, feel free to, add in your own thoughts. And it's even better because we didn't have this back then, but I'm imagining imagine a world where, I know not everyone, look, again, I lost my job, but imagine a world where, like, if you subscribe to a thread, if you subscribe to a post, some different people have different things, but I'm going to call it a thread. Imagine if you subscribe to a thread on a forum, and what would happen is, it would know the last time you went to that forum. And when you re-enter that forum, there would be a thing that was like, basically, since the last time you were here, there were this many messages, okay, 100 threads, 100 posts, and here is the AI summary of what the last 100 messages were. Or imagine if there was a forum, and there was a thread that looked really interesting, but it was 700 messages long. And you want to join that thread and you want to start making a comment because it's an interesting topic and you're interested in it, but you don't want to read 700 messages. Well, now we have AI. And now AI can, when you join it, one of the things you could hit in this theoretical forum app is summarize thread. And it would go through and it would provide a summary and it would say, here's the deal. Yeah, well, I mean, I hate to tell you this, but every single message that you send on every single platform of every single nature is being read by AI. So yeah, okay. What do they do? Do they not Google search? Because I don't know if you notice this. If you use Google search, it goes to AI. But anyways, I think that'd be cool. I would use that. That to me is a good use of AI for sure. Exactly my point, Jasari. So we should encourage that by creating an ability to quickly summarize the what are the key contentious what is the general theme, what are some of the key contentious points, what are some of the unresolved issues. I think it'd be great. I just like forums. Yeah. But that's just the thing, is that the threads and the forums are engaging. Maybe that wasn't you, Beowulf, but I mean, back in the day when I was on forum threads, like that's when I felt like I was the most engaged in some ways. Because every post was like its own complete story, which I really liked. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be the equivalent of open chat, I mean, I think there was, again, when I was doing that stuff, there was still AOL Instant Messenger. And I think there's always going to be a place for, and before that we had, IRC chat and stuff like that. But, bulletin boards and message boards, I mean, that was where the original genesis was. And I think that's way more interesting for sure. For me, in terms of properly, categorizing and distilling information, I think it is the preferred thing. Well, again, well, the other problem with Discord is you can only participate if you're online at that exact moment. That's the other problem. I feel bad sometimes. A lot of times I feel bad. We have people who join our Discord who are, over in Europe, and they get online and, well, they're not interacting with any, you know what I mean? Like when they get on at 3 a.m, a lot of people are offline. And so there's no, what are they going to do? Just leave a random message in a channel from a post from 10 hours ago and then just like, no, like it's the conversation has moved on, right? It's the equivalent of like fast fashion. And I just don't listen, yeah, linking messages can only go so far, and it doesn't work. So you can, but 9 times out of 10, they're never it's done, right? The conversation's over, and it's not going to keep going. Yes, like there's nothing wrong with the BS chatting. I love BS chatting. Of course I do. But I think forums are ultimately a better version, a better way to categorize and write down information. So, yeah. And for me, I have other goals beyond just, people wasting their time. No, I did not know that. Wow, that's sweet. That game has been out of print for a long time. Yep. Tigris and Euphrates reprint announced by Rainer Knizia to be published by 25th Century Game with new art by Ian O'Toole. With crowdfunding coming in Q1 2026. After many delays, cancellations, and game switching publishers, I'm glad it's announced. I'm happy they kept the theme and name and an excellent choice of publisher and artist. This will look excellent next to my new copy of Raw. Well, that's awesome. I mean, obviously, I don't need it because I own the original Tigris and Euphrates. Will I buy it? Of course. It's one of my. It's one of, if not my favorite game of all time. Wow. Very cool. What a classic. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about Tigris and Euphrates, a game by Reiner Knizia. Reiner Knizia has a very interesting mechanic that he uses in a lot of his board games. The way it works is you have 4 different categories to score in. Literally, in Tigris and Euphrates, there's red, blue, green, and black. Okay, you can score black points, you can score red points, you can score blue points, you can score green points. They're little cubes. Your score is whichever color you have the least of. So if you had 100 black cubes, 100 red cubes, 100 blue cubes, but only 2 green cubes, your score, for purposes of who won the game, is 2. He used it in a couple different games and played around with that scoring idea in a couple different games. And it's really great. The theme is obviously based around like Mesopotamian empires, fighting over the Fertile Crescent, basically. But I do love Knizia. Right. It rewards diversification rather than monopolies, which is a very different way that a lot of people. In fact, actually, I think in some ways it's very opposite, right, to the way that most role-playing games work. Wouldn't you agree that most role-playing games reward you for going all in on one strategy rather than being a diverse character? I think that's generally speaking true. There are very little advantages to being diverse because typically you have other party members and or the game itself is balanced around the idea that they just assume that you're going to be trying to get the highest bonus that you can possibly get in that thing. And so the entire rest of the game is predicated and balanced around the idea that, okay, what is this? The minimum is also the maximum, right? Someone who has max stat with max item bonus with max proficiency bonus, someone who went all in on attacking. Okay. All armor classes have to be indexed to that level, which is crazy, but that is the way that a lot of these games work. Yeah. 13th Age does a good job of rewarding you for being a little bit diverse because you take the middle. It's true. Yeah, I mean, I will freely admit I was always more of a forum guy than a chat room. I didn't really like chat rooms. Chat rooms were always just full of weird guys trying to sleep with young women in the era of the internet that I grew up with. I mean, unless it was like my friends. Like, obviously, I would chat with like my people I knew in real life, but like in terms of like public chat rooms, yeah. Chat rooms were creepy. Okay, I'm glad it wasn't just me, but again, I was born in '82, so I was a teenager in like the mid '90s, and it was some wild times. Apparently, it still is. I believe it. So. Oh, so we were talking about I don't remember what. Oh, I think maybe it was when Steven was on the show recently. I don't remember. But we were talking about Dungeon a Day, which was a website that used to be run a long time ago by Monty Cook. And the idea was that every day, Monday through Friday, you would get a new dungeon room every day until the dungeon was essentially complete. And I was saying that, I was like, and we were talking about that with hexes. Well, I was talking about that with hexes. And I mean, it doesn't have to be per day, right? It could be per week. It could be on Mondays and Wednesdays, or, Mondays and Thursdays, or something like that. As kind of like a way to sort of get a trickle of a of a development. And I wondered if that would be something that in today's world, via something like a Patreon, where people are already paying money, in that model. And we talked about like the Dragon Magazine model, the Dragon Magazine model, where it's like, you look forward to getting that thing. And it's kind of like, one of those things where it's like, would you rather get something like Dolmen Wood, all at once after several years? Or, is there more fun to be had when you kind of is given to you piece by piece by piece by piece over a long period of time? The webcomic schedule. Sure. And I thought about that. That might be I mean, I don't know that, of course I'm always, hesitant to commit to something that I don't know anything about, but I wonder if that would be a better way for someone like me, to get something released. Like for example, we obviously we talk about Project Shadow Deep, right? This Shadow Dark, old school, whatever, mega dungeon. The idea of sitting down and doing, 100+ rooms, is very intimidating, obviously, and a lot of work. And you have no idea when you're doing the work if that's even going to be something that is going to be profitable, because like you just don't know. And so I wonder if it's more plausible to be able to do something like that. Like you have the dungeon, right? There was like the Dungeon 365 or whatever like that. But the thing is realistically, I think doing it every single day is a little bit too much, especially if you want the quality to be good. I mean, the whole Dungeon 365 was just draw a dungeon. It wasn't really design one. But I think that kind of subscription-based approach, I think is kind of cool, and I wonder if that would make it more doable for someone like me, only because then the final product doesn't represent, how can I put this? A lot of people say, well, Derek, the first thing that you produce is going to be garbage. Fair. And I just have a hard time producing an entire book that's garbage. But what's cool about that model is you very quickly get experience. Maybe the first, 10 things, the first 10 rooms or the first half a level was kind of rough, but you got a lot of feedback, right? Instantaneously from people. And then you kind of dialed it in. And so the vast majority of the product is better, which I think is a lot. I think that seems a lot. I think that seems a lot better in my mind, at least. Why are you against publishing your mega games as a PDF for others to play? Well, because it doesn't really make any sense, in the sense of like, it's very well, for starters, the mega game itself doesn't exist. It's a framework that only exists because the people in it play it. And then the other thing is that, I mean, how useful is it? How many people are out there trying to run multi-GM, dozens and dozens of players, multi-GM games? I don't know. Who does that benefit? Who does that help? I don't know that it helps anybody. I'm not saying like I'm against it. I just feel like it's a lot of juice, or a lot of squeeze for very little juice. Is this circling back to the beginning of the stream in the Year of Mysteries and Dungeon Magazine? It is. Yes, it is. Absolutely. I don't need to publish Shadow Deep. There's nothing technically in Shadow Deep. I mean, the only thing we have, what do we even have in Shadow Deep these days? We have, it's been a while since we've even been there. Nope, that's nothing. There we go. Window capture, whiteboard. We have. it. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yeah. So we have level 1 laid out, I think is what we have laid out in terms of like the actual flow chart of it. Obviously none of these have, details. It was just sort of more of a structural plus play pattern flow. We talked about some of the areas, but so there's not really, again, the whole point of Project Shadow Deep was never actually to make Shadow Deep. It was just to talk about the framework and the structure of designing it. And then people started saying you need to publish it. And I was like, I don't actually know that is the value of that. Well, I'm glad you enjoy watching it. Yeah, there you go. TV. See, like, for example, I liked that format, Yuval. I know this sounds crazy, but the modern day format of like where they just drop all 12 episodes at once, I hate it. And not that I watch TV anymore, but maybe that's one of the reasons I don't watch TV anymore. I used to enjoy, like, you watch one episode a week and then that's it. I've never, in my entire life, I've never binge watched a television show. I can't do it. In fact, I like to digest my meal. I love, like, when I used to watch Lost or whatever, you'd watch one episode, you'd talk about it, you'd speculate. Now it's like, it's just all over and done with in one binge-filled weekend. I absolutely hate that model. But right, exactly. You do it piecemeal. I mean, again, I'm going to get really, what's the word I'm looking for? Scummy here. What you do is you charge people to put it out one episode, one piece at a time. And then when it's all released, then you do a Kickstarter and you have everybody buy it again. But it's not really scummy because, like, people are like, I want to do this, right? So I say scummy, but it's, it's not. So, well, that, Rob, I'm not going to, Rob, I assume you're talking about Shadow Deep. I will agree that I have probably put way more thought process into why the mega dungeon, not just what the mega dungeon. And I think that's the problem. A lot of people design their dungeons, even their large ones, based pretty much on vibes. And they base it on cool encounters, right? They base it on cool rooms. Whereas for me, it's more about the holistic whole. I guess holistic whole. It's more about the holistic picture than these individual encounter pieces. In fact, that's a great way that I look at role-playing games in general. I really think role-playing games are much bigger than the sum of their parts. I don't care if individual encounters are actually all that cool. What matters to me more is when you take a big step back and you've been playing for several weeks and you look back from a 10,000-foot view at what you've created. And that's when you start to see the beauty and the design and the intricacies and the cool components. I'm not as concerned about making every single, like, another way to put it is, we talk about Lost and we're talking about Netflix shows. There's like two ways of thinking about it. Like, do you want every episode to be a 10 out of 10, but the season is only like a 5 out of 10? Or would you rather have episodes that were like 7s out of 10 and 8s out of 10 and maybe the occasional 10 out of 10, but sometimes like a 5 out of 10, but the whole season was a 9 out of 10, or the whole show, the series from seasons 1 to season 5 was a 9 out of 10. See, I'd rather have a great show than a bunch of great episodes in an otherwise shitty show. So that's my approach to D&D. That's my approach to almost everything about role-playing games, which is I don't really care as much about the individual session. I don't even really care if the session is fun. What I think about is, how does this serve the campaign? And I want to be able to look back and go, wow, look at that campaign. Because while you're playing the campaign, that sessions come and go. But some of the great campaigns of my life, I look back to now over 10, 20, 30 years ago, and I still remember them so well. How many TV shows had incredible episodes, but then they shit the bed on the ending and you go, no one will ever watch it again. I mean, Game of Thrones defined television, and it ended so badly. It almost devalues. I have this idea that some people think is crazy, which is that I can retroactively dislike something, right? For me, some of the best episodes of Game of Thrones are now worse because the ending was bad. And some people think I'm crazy for that, but it is just how my brain works. So. Well, that's the beautiful thing about a Commander Snookums. We don't have to publish. You could just make it, and then if it works out, it works out. Vin says, I think it is, and I should try it. Your garbage is better than most that I've paid for. I think that's a compliment. Thank you, Rob. Right. Season one, not great. Season 2, in some ways, maybe worse. Although there are some bangers in there. But yeah, season 3 is great. Okay, so that's the difference. I don't think a page a day of a role-playing game makes any sense, because I don't think you can design an RPG like that. I think an RPG comes together by being designed kind of quasi all at the same time. And I think a lot of times you're going to go back and update and change things. And so that's not really the same thing. The idea of this is that, like, if we go and let's just say we're playing, we're doing Shadow Deep in this way, Mashin, right? So when we designed this room, that room is done. It's not going to be updated. It's not going to be it's done. It's not like it's part of a rough draft. It's not part of anything like that. But yeah, people want that deluxe edition at the end that everything comes in there. Well, presumably though, right? Maybe is the book finished? I don't know. I don't know. Stephen King writes so much. I mean, he's on a different plane of course. Just feed me a single episode every week is exactly Stockholm Syndrome. I preferred it. I don't know. What can I say? Granted, I'm also weird like that. I prefer episodic television to syndicated continuous storylines for sure. TV guide. That reminds me. I mean, it's a public thing, whatever. I don't care. I had a great idea for an app. I don't even know. Maybe anytime you have a cool idea, someone's already done it. My idea for an app was, and if somebody does steal this, that's cool. Just, throw me $1 million. Okay. My idea for an app was, you get an app and then you add people to your app. Okay. And like your husband or your girlfriend or, whatever, people you watch TV with. Okay. And then you select what services you have. Netflix, Disney, whatever. And then it's like Tinder. A show pops up. It's just random. And you either swipe it left or swipe it right. And you can do this at work or while you're on the toilet or whatever. And, drinking your coffee. And then if you and your partner or whatever, you and your girlfriend, you and your buddies or whatever, you have different groups. If you all swiped right on a show, then that show gets added to your "we should watch this" queue, right? And that's it. Instead of like what do you want to watch? 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 You just, you just Tinder it. You just life swipe, life, and you do it on your own at your own time. And it just eventually builds up a list of everybody that you would, want to watch a show with. And then it would remember which ones you right swiped and left swiped. And then if you and your partner or you and your friend group have all right swiped on a show, the algorithm can start to be like, hey, these are some shows that you guys might like, and it can recommend them to you and you guys can swipe them or whatever. And then also when you meet, let's say you meet a new person and you're like, hey, do you want to Netflix and chill? And they're like, great, what do you want to watch? And you guys can exchange your IR codes or whatever like that. And then it would say, oh, you guys should watch this show. And you can also track what, if you've watched the show, and then you can give it feedback and, all this other stuff. I don't know. I've always thought it was pretty cool. That's a great way. Exactly. You remember a campaign better than a session. That's a great way. Dragon Magazine did not do a page a week, to the best of my knowledge, at least not during the time when I was subscription. The ending ruined How I Met Your Mother. There's a lot of shows that were ended by a very bad ending for sure. No one knows how to end anything. That's true. Yeah, Ted sucked, but I wasn't really a fan. Like people are like, oh, Barney should have ended with Robin. I didn't like that relationship either. Well, role playing is such a small portion of the game. It's almost kind of crazy. There you go. Pumpkin says, I need this app. My fiance and I spend hours looking for a show or movie that we both want to watch. There you go. Tinder for shows. Are you literally saying, no, I think this would be great. This would solve everybody's issues. Food would be a great way to do it as well, too. Like you could do it with restaurants and area. In fact, I think we've had that idea too. So an app that advertises shows and movies with the gamification of Tinder. Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. Of course. I mean, listen, you gotta monetize it somehow, right, Jake? Actually, you could do that with like if you had board game groups, right? You could everyone could what board games do you right swipe or you left swipe? Well, this is why I don't really like the algorithmic approach, and I also think that one of the problems with algorithmic approaches, algorithmic approaches can be useful, but what you need to have the ability to do is to be able to like reset your algorithm. That needs to be an option where basically you say, delete everything about me that you know. I think that would be way more useful, right? Where you can just delete and say, hey, look, my tastes have substantially changed. You're still weighting this too heavily based off of my old patterns. Or maybe I got really interested in, I don't know, English period pieces for a while. Or I mean, obviously opt out of it. And then show me some new stuff. Exactly, Yuval cards. You should be able to enter like a discovery mode where it almost is literally just giving you random videos, not what other people like. Again, literally completely unbiased. Yeah, that would be cool. I didn't watch Stranger Things 4 or 5. I liked season 3, which a lot of people apparently did not like. But for me, I was like, I'm good with the show. I don't need to watch 4. And I definitely didn't watch 5. And I don't have Netflix anymore. However, I've heard people saying that they think there's like a conspiracy that there's going to be a shadow final, a real final episode dropped today or something, because they're like some sort of conspiracy theory that like the final episode was like actually just like an illusion or something. Which I love. It reminds me of my old Lost days, and I really appreciate that, Right. This is exactly right, Jake. Right? You watch one video about raccoons, or not even, Jake. You just hover over the thumbnail for a little. You never even click on it, but you let it play for a little bit because you're like, what? And then somehow it goes, oh, we got to show this person every raccoon video that's ever been out there. That's the problem. They are way too sensitive, way too overcorrected. 100%. Yeah, exactly. What? Derek liked something that other people didn't? Crazy. But I will say this about Stranger Things. That intro still goes so hard. One of my favorite intros of all time. So good. All right. Yeah, I only have 2 YouTube accounts. I have my original YouTube account, and then I have my Knights of Last Call account. That is good news because I'm supposed to be running a game on Friday, and I don't want to make any monsters. Did they just post something or something? Or is that just like, are you just guessing? Because like I didn't see any announcements. It does. It really does. The aesthetic is massive. It's huge. Massive. Absolutely massive. Oh, okay. I seem to remember there being January 7th being a date, but I didn't know if that got like messed up or anything like that because of what they were doing. So yeah. Anyways, see, I thought I was going to talk about random mega game stuff, and I ended up talking about God knows what, a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, there's something to be said about the 80s, and it's like they always say, right, like that nowadays all the TV writers are setting all their shows now in like the 80s or the 90s because cell phones ruin drama. And like so many things are just completely ruined when you consider both access to Google, or like access to the entirety of human knowledge, and the ability to essentially call or reach out to talk to anyone at any time. Basically, kind of completely shits on every context of But oh yeah, nostalgia and having instant communication ruined complicates a lot. But yeah, exactly. So it makes total sense to me. I mean, think about how many GMs, advice articles, videos from all your favorite dungeon tubers have basically been like, even to the extent that in Pathfinder 2 all of these spells are uncommon now because they're like, hey, all these magic spells like speak with dead and telepathy and discern lies and teleport, all these things that can ruin your adventure, and so let's figure out a way to kind of get rid of them, basically, because it's kind of like the equivalent of a cell phone. I mean, there's so many games, there's so many movies that just literally wouldn't exist even remotely close to the if it wasn't for the lack of that. Declan confirms it does exist. There we go. Rob, thank you so much. Rob asking a really important question. This is huge deal. KOLC somehow publishes someday. All right. Poll is up. KLC publishes someday. Letter, A5, some asshole other aspect ratio. Wait, is A0 the one that's like the size of a person or like a banner ad or something? Or is like 2 meters square or something like that? Is that the massive one? Oh, we got I don't know. I mean A5 is cool, but don't you think it's a little played out? Don't you think it's a little played out? I feel like it's starting to get a little played out. 1-page mega dungeon. Oh, it's a single page, but I'm thinking 1-page mega dungeon. Instead of 1-page dungeon, it's 1-page mega dungeon. Letter is 8.5 by 11. Well, of course you can, Sidari. You're like, oh, the electronic disturbance of the monster has put down the cell phone networks and they don't work. No, 8.5 inches by 11 inches. Yeah. It's close to A4. So basically, when you see letters, just think A4. Mostly. You should make a mega game dungeon system instead of islands. So you've missed, Jacob. Unfortunately, that won't work. And you know, I respect it. I like the idea. I don't think it's a bad one. But the problem that unfortunately a lot of these mega games have is that like making a dungeon is a lot of work. And a lot of people who play in these mega games do it because it's a fun, like, extra activity that they can do and they can experiment, they can try stuff. And I'm not saying that they don't put in work. They do put in a lot of work. But dungeons are a different kind of work. And asking, you know, even with like Dragon Tide, where we had islands, asking people to create an island that could be hex crawled turned out to be a lot of work. And a lot of people, I think, were turned off from GMing because of that. So one of the things that I want to do for it's a lot of paperwork. You know, I mean, between me, you, and the however many people are here, 95, Jesus Christ. I really am thinking I can't afford it. In fact, actually, one of our patrons reached out to like the person who like runs one of these large 5e campaigns. And 5e mega campaigns. And they had this really cool bot. And they basically, you know, asked, I didn't ask them to ask. They just were, you know, they were doing their own research. And they basically just said like, hey, what would it cost? This bot is really cool. It like automates everything. It like tracks your character. It's all 5e, of course. And the person basically said, I'm not even going to tell you how much it costs because it's just not even remotely feasible for anybody else. And so there's no world in which I could ever hire a developer to like make something that would truly automate our game. But in theory, well, I mean, in practice, but in theory, I have a degree in computer science and I do not use computers, and AI exists. And so there is a world where I kind of want to start experimenting with more automation and trying to take some of that stuff offline and figure out a way to make it, you know, look cool and look slick. And again, the problem is it's just never going to be worth the school juice. But that's it's such a shame to do such a shitty job of something just because, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is, unfortunately. But anyways, one of the things that I wanted to do, I guess I could use Excalibur. Well, I was gonna pull out a whiteboard. I guess I'll pull out a whiteboard. I should use B6. So one of the things that one of the, yeah, I know that. Thank you. One of the things that I really enjoy about Wilderfeast is that in theory, you would already have the regions, you know, sort of mapped out, and you'd have these locations. And again, it's not a hex crawl, it's just a point crawl. And each area within a region has different properties. And as a GM, all you would be responsible for running is a monster. That's it. Because the entire gameplay pattern, I mean, there's of course you could make more complicated things as a GM. You could potentially create your own area, you know, your own bespoke area, your own special area. You could create a dungeon. You could create a bunch of different stuff. But fundamentally, the whole point, the gameplay pattern is the PCs go into an area, they look for signs of the monster, they might encounter some, you know, different people or different challenges, and then they might find the tracks, and then they move to the next area, and again, they're trying to track down the monster. Oh, the monster was just here, but it just moved to this area. So now the PCs are in this area, and then they move to this area, and that's where they fight the monster, and then you have this, you know, 5v1 battle that the game uses. And again, the combat of Wilderfeast is, excuse me, load? Maybe? No. Thinking? There we go. The combat of Wilderfeast. Oh, wow. That was really lagged. The combat of Wilderfeast is basically designed around the idea that it's all relative to the monster. So, basically the monster is at range 0. And so when you put your PCs are either at range 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. There's no grid or anything like that. Like range 4, you don't worry about like, am I behind the monster? Or you could be, but like you're just at range 4. So it's like a very simplistic combat. But essentially a normal gameplay pattern would be the PCs go through a handful of areas trying to track down a monster. And then if they find the monster, they fight the monster. And then if they kill the monster, they eat the monster. They cook it and eat it. And that's it. That's the whole session. I mean, that would be a very successful session. So in that respect, the GM doesn't have to come up with 3 to 4 encounters, and they don't have to come up with like some factions, and they don't have to come up with battle maps, and they don't have to come up with a dungeon or, an adventure flow chart or anything. Now, could they? Yeah. I mean, you could make this game as complex as you want, but the basic play pattern is, track the monster, hunt the monster, cook the monster. I should say, fight the monster, cook, eat, and all you really need for that is a monster. And, there's plenty of monsters in the book that you can run. In fact, each zone or region would have this area is known for for the lalu bird, which is this, terrifying emu-like monster with, teeth instead of a beak or something like that. And the GM could just say, hey, I'm going to run a hunt for a lalu bird. Does anyone want to sign up? And the players go, yeah, I'll sign up. Cool. And then you go run a hunt for a lalu bird. And that's it. That's like kind of almost the amount of prep that you would need to do. It's pretty simple, basic. Of course, a GM could also potentially, with a certain amount of permission or a certain amount of authority, they might be able to create their own, unique monster and, these other elements. They could, but they don't have to, And so I think that's another advantage that this game has, is that this is all based on the person saying like, oh, you should have a bunch of dungeons. The problem is when you start asking a GM to create a dungeon, and not just any dungeon, but like a good dungeon, like especially one that, Derek might say is good because it's got interesting decisions and there's player agency. And I mean, we've already done so much work just to do this 5-room dungeon. So yeah, it's kind of, that's one of the things that I think is going to be very interesting that I would want to explore with. Part of the reason I enjoy or I'm interested in this game is because it seems like it would be really, really easy for the GMs to run. The downside or whatever of that is that, you need to have these areas defined. But the cool part about it is you're not defining them for one GM. All the GMs would be using these areas over and over and over again. And that's what's cool about it is, if one of these areas is like, I don't know, is the Stone Spire Verge, you might have your monster end up in the Stone Spire Verge and you fight the monster there. And then another GM might end up, their PCs go through the Stone Spire Verge and et cetera, et cetera. So like this area gets used by numerous people over and over and over again. It's one of my things that I think could potentially bring people together a little bit from like a competitive or a community aspect. So Bob says that as long as you have enough time, you can do a lot with LLMs. Yeah, for sure. It's 2:45. We're breaking out the whiteboard. Yeah, I'm gonna be signing off in the next 10 minutes. I do have to go to bed because I do have to get up in the morning. Wilderfeast is such a good example of how to do theater of the mind combat well, in my opinion. By focusing on just one monster, it makes it so much more suited. Yeah, agreed. One region per season. Probably not, Alexander. I mean, it depends on the whole season thing. I mean, we've talked about this to the death, but like the original intent, the reason we had the reason for the season, the reason for the season is Jesus. No, the reason for the season was because we were playing PF2, and in our original Northern Reaches season 1, you gained XP from sessions, and you leveled up at, when you got 1,000 experience points, you leveled up. And so what that meant is that as time went on, right, from 1 month, take care, Beowulf, to 3 months to 6 months, everybody started at level 1. But by the time you got a month in, you had some people who were level 3 and some people who were still level 1. And by the time you got 3 months in, you had people who were level 9, and you had some people that were level 5, and you had some people that were level 3, and you still had some people that were level 1. And by the time you got 6 months in, you had people that were level 20, and you had people that were level, 12 and 10 and 8 and 4. And these people all couldn't play with each other. And so as time wore on, characters became more and more and more and more spread out because we were playing PF2. And so what the season enabled us to do is it enabled us to just kill that and restart, and everybody's back at level 1. So the whole reason we had seasons was because of PF2 and the XP model. And that way, if somebody got really powerful and they had really powerful items, because we knew that we were going to be handing out, custom, bespoke, potentially broken items and could break the game. And that was part of the fun for us as overlords, is like, because we knew we could get away with it because the season would end and everyone would get hard reset back to the beginning. And so that was the model for season 1, for season 2, etc. Now, alternatively, you got Pumpkin here, and I joined halfway through season 1 and I still made it to level 20. I got on that grind, people talked about getting on grinding XP, and there were different ways that people did that, but mostly it was just through playing in a lot of sessions. And right, exactly, Jake, you lose the benefits of a mega game if people can't play together. So the whole reason we had the seasons was so that we could reset the game. The other thing is we knew we were going to be learning as we were doing. And so the season model basically gave us the ability to sort of, play for 9 months and then end the season. And that gave us a good 3 months, which usually ended up taking more like 3 to 5 months, if I'm being honest, to make changes and to make updates to the game and to do surveys and get feedback and make adjustments. Because it's not like we're some massive development team out of Blizzard. It's Smith basically making all of these changes. And so, now this sort of, gave everybody gave us a break, and it gave everybody else a break as well. And it's sort of a chance to sort of be like excited. Yeah. We always did this over the holidays because that's when most people were super busy. And now we actually see that most of the time our games kind of die in September. Kids go back to school. People are jamming for the end of people are getting geared up for the holidays. Work deadlines are, crushing on people before end of year JOs and stuff. So, but, by the time we get to like October, November, it's just dead inside. So I would personally think, for me, I actually think the best time that we could run a game would be January to like June. But everyone tells me I'm crazy, and that's not the best time to run a game. Because in my mind, like, nobody has anything going on in January. It's, at least here in North America, it's winter, and there's not a lot of major holidays in this time frame. Everyone's kind of in school, heads down. It's not the summertime. You're not doing your family vacations. The kids aren't home. Like, people get out. They want to get out and be outdoors during the summertime and stuff like that. But, Wes says January through April is my busy time at work. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I've always thought that this would be like the ideal time to run the game. And then you end it and you're basically off for the summer and the fall, which is, the major holidays for us into the early winter, Halloween, Labor Day, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. And then, when you get into the dark of winter, as we say, there's just nothing, so January is just completely. And Jen, you were absolutely right, Zen. What we have found is that, usually, June to like August is like, this is our peak. So people really do play more in the summer, which is crazy to me. I would never have thought that, but that is when people play. But yeah, anyways. So anyways, the whole reason we have seasons is because the people out-leveled them. And also, too, we knew that in any game where you had vertical escalation, right, you were going to get, you had to do a reset eventually, because eventually people were going to get to 20th level. And then, where do you go from there? And by the way, we try to answer that in season 2 of Northern Reaches, where once you got to 20th level, you could keep gaining levels in a new class. And after you reach 20th level in that class, you could keep gaining levels in a third class. And I think we had a character by the end of season 2 who might have been in their 60s, 60th level. So, and they were essentially, a 20/20/20 character. I think that was Ono. I mean, we had other characters that were very high level, but yeah, I don't know. So when I look at a game like Wilderfeast, come back to Wilderfeast, I'm pretty sure that your character, the highest, here we go. So the highest that your styles can get to is 5. There we go. So the highest your styles can get to is 5. Yeah, so like you can theoretically max these out at 5, 5, 5, 5. And I think your skills can all max out at 3. And it's like at a certain point, like before you even get to this point, like, it's almost like you at a certain point, you just want to reset the game, But yeah. And now we have surveys out, and now people are saying, which is crazy to me, like the surveys that we do are like, how long should a season be? And people are saying they should be between 8 to 12 weeks. That is crazy to me. I don't understand that. I'm having a hard time understanding this data. And we have to, technically the Northern Reaches survey is still going on. People still need to fill it out. So like, this is crazy to me. Like, that's not even enough time. I don't know. That's just crazy to me. I don't know. I can't even imagine playing a normal campaign, for that short time, let alone a mega campaign. But I think the desire for the 8 to 12 is that like, it's a balance for these people between like how long they're going to be able to remain interested before their interest just inevitably wanes. But I also think it's also the case that like, they understand that as time goes on, there's going to be some people in the game who are going to be getting stronger than they are. And they are only going to be getting, this strong. And they don't want to play to this point. They don't want to play to this point. They want to play to this point. Right. Where like they understand that other people are pulling away from them. But and they want to end it. But well, that's what's crazy about it is, I mean, that's the other thing too. I mean, we joked about, about going back to season 1 of Northern Reaches. We've talked about this before, but in season 1 of Northern Reaches, your character, when you played an adventure, you were locked out for 2 to 6 days. You couldn't play your character anymore, your PC. Now, some people did have multiple PCs, but then you weren't advancing that one PC, right? So if you had your primary PC and they were level 5 and you went on an adventure on Monday, they might be locked out until Thursday. So you have to pull up your secondary PC and they might only be level 3. but unfortunately, this runs into logistical issues, which is, we've never had so many players and been so blessed with so many people playing that we can afford to have a person available and freely available and willing to play. And, they have a character that could even play with you, but then you go, but I'm locked out. Sorry, I can't play. Bob loves it. I'll tell you this, the current council absolutely hates it. I myself, I think it's a good mechanic. I think it's cool to have multiple PCs and other stuff was, yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I mean, Wes, that's the way that Gary Gygax is. We talked about this before in the Dungeon Master Guide for AD&D. That's exactly the way it worked. One day in real life was one day in the campaign. And so you might play a session on a Friday night, but in that session, you might spend 2 or 3 weeks in the game world. And now in the game world, it is now January 28th. And that means that the next time that you're going to be able to play is when the real life calendar catches up to January 28th. Now, I don't know that I would go that extreme, but it's pretty cool. Yeah. I think that's another thing, Pumpkin. People talk about the different styles of play, and there's this style of play now that they call the OC style. I don't really know where that term came from. But like, I think it stands for like original character or something like that. Emphasize, but it's really like the focus is on like, creating a protagonist, right? Yeah. I know what it means. I mean, I know it means an original character. Oh, it's from fanfic writing. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Fan art. Got it. But it's usually, it's very, I hate to say it, but it's very self-indulgent. It's usually it's usually in my mind a pejorative term. It's very self-indulgent. It's like my character and I'm going to get custom art for them and I got dice that match them and I'm going to cosplay as my character and it's all about my character. It's very, very selfish focused. And selfish doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but it's just very focused on me. Anyways, I do think to a certain extent, Pumpkin, that the mega games have gone a little bit more that road, because I think you're right. I think the original D&D style where you have a primary character and then you have a couple secondary characters that function as like maybe henchmen or something of the primary character, and then you even have a couple tertiary characters just in case. You talked about the term a stable of characters. I think that's very anti, my special character that I want to put all my emphasis and soul, for the people who really are into role playing and stuff like that. I think that's very unappealing, is to have this, to treat like you're logging into World of Warcraft, right? And you've got your 8, 10, whatever character slots. And you're like, oh, let me go play my alt. That kind of terminology, that kind of approach to gaming, I think is very, very, is very opposite. Well, yeah, but you say that, Yuval, but I know that there's a lot of people who are really into the sort of deep immersion, deep actor stance. Don't like the idea of Ars Magica, because the idea of showing up at a session and not playing your character, but instead of playing, somebody else's, what are they called? Groks or whatever. I can't remember the term. Right. Would be really unappealing to them. They're like, no, I'm here to play my character. Just sorry says, most of my players will never do that. They make one character and think nothing about a potential backup. Yeah. So, I don't know if I don't think anybody's running Ars Magica. It might be somebody who ran it once, but I don't know. Right now, I don't think the answer is no. Right. Jasari talking about why they're purchases, because they don't think they'll possibly die and not get a satisfying conclusion before the character is done. And by the way, Jasari, that's fine. And that's why games like Daggerheart and Fabula Ultima are so great. I think you could absolutely go go hardcore OC in a game like Fabula Ultima because I can't kill you. You know, you can, if something bad happens to you, avoid death or, you know, surrender. You wait till you have your cool moment and you feel like your character has that satisfying conclusion. And then you'll either retire the character, the campaign will end, or you'll be like, no, this is a cool moment for my character. Where they would go out, and I'm going to choose to sacrifice in a really big, fucking awesome, cool, heroic, over the top way. Cool. You know, and Fabula Ultima, I think, is very much designed around that idea. And I think that, you know, there's a little bit of blending of cultures here. Zero, I don't even know. I have to get up in like 5 hours, so I probably have to go to bed. Sure. What's interesting, no, you're absolutely right. That collaborative element is a big deal for some people who don't like it. So I get it. They are really into that sense of discovery, which I think is, you know, is a little bit lacking when you pull back the curtain and show them how the sausage is made, you know. All right. Well, I said I was going to get off at 3. It's 3 a.m., 3:05 a.m. So I'm going to dip out. As a reminder, I'm going to be on RFC later today. And then Thursday, we are going to be doing our Golden Nights. I'm going to be going and doing a retrospective on, we had some categories and some nominations from the patrons. And we're going to be basically looking at games that we talked about, that we looked at, that we deep dived, that we first looked, that we played, that we conversated about, that we were excited about, that we were despairing about in 2025. And we're going to give out some awards, meaningless, pointless awards, totally subjective with tons of bias in 2025. And then we're going to be doing a first look on Sunday. We're going to do a Sunday super secret Sunday system stream, as we used to back in the day. We're going to be doing a first look at an indie RPG called Heroic Deeds, which is actually written by one of our Knights of Last Call patron members. And it looks really cool. There's some really neat mechanics in that. And this person wrote the game after sort of being aware of and knowing and having listened to the Knights. And apparently some of my design philosophy helped this author when they were creating their game. So I'm really interested in looking forward to that. Because it'll be really interesting to see how well that translates. Now, they did say I'm ready to be completely critiqued and tore apart, but we'll see. I'm excited to take a look at it. So we're going to be taking a look at that. It's called Heroic Deeds. And we're going to be doing that on Sunday. In the meantime, I'm going to keep doing things that make me little to no money. And I appreciate all of you sticking around for that. And throwing money at me regardless so that I'm not homeless. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Jake says heroic reaches. Yeah, I'm excited to take a look at it. I only know what Garblag has told me, so which is not much. So we're gonna definitely crack it open and we're gonna get into that, and I think it'll be a lot of fun, especially because it's kind of weird. Someone's be like, yeah, no, I was, there were elements, there was a lot of stuff in there that I think you'll recognize as being things that you influenced and stuff like that. So it's really neat. So thank you, Rob Stopper, for the super chat. Thank you, Self-Confessed Cynic, for the super chat. Thank you for the tips, Joshua and Cinnabos. Appreciate you. And thank you, Zen Bullet, for getting us started off with 2 trolling $5 super chats. That's the way we do it around here. I want to say thank you to all my patrons. Appreciate all of you. And I'm looking forward to doing the 90s, the Golden 90s, on Thursday. And we'll be back for more exciting fun in the future as we continue into 2026. I'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody.